your thoughts on this moment?
Yeah, Tom, it's extraordinary here, and I think it's fascinating to see what the House will do once they presumably pass the articles of impeachment. Do they hold them? Or do they immediately send them to the Senate and say, hey, this is in your lap, you take care of it? Or do they try to be more strategic and trying to balance the Biden's first 100 days with the messiness of a Senate trial?
I go to the emotion of Nancy Ognatovich, who's legendary on the Hill. Yes. She's such an asset for Bloomberg News. And Nancy Ognatovich was emotional about, I love how you say it, Paul. They've got to move on after the business at hand. I believe it will be scheduled tomorrow. But you wonder in what way do the elected officials, the staff, the Capitol Police and such, how they get to February forgetting about getting out to making policy into the new year.
Yeah, and I've been seeing on Twitter, Tom, some of the feeds from some of these young staffers, and many of them, are still, I guess the best word is traumatized, and they're trying to deal with it in the context of proceeding with, which is, a second impeachment, not to mention trying to gear up for the first 100 days of a Biden administration.
We say thank you to Billy House and Nancy Ognatovich and all of our Capitol Hill team, even Kevin Cirilli. I mean, Cirilli's like a nice male, but even Kevin Cirilli for his great work down in Washington. It has become important. Sound On with Kevin Cirilli. That is nationwide, 5 p.m. here on Bloomberg Radio. He's got the ability in his 3-hour workday to pick up the phone and get terrific voices, really naked conversation on this political moment. Sound On with Kevin Cirilli tonight.
Time now for the Trading Diary. You need to be watching this week.
If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right, but getting started. Healthy changes start with little changes, one way or another, and help you to feel better, inside and out, so you'll be healthier but more able to fight diseases. Download the free NHS weight loss app now. Search Better Health. Let's do this.
Daddy, time to play.
Play 3 up front today. I can see us scoring a truck load.
Daddy, let's play a game.
Game should be in the bag. Think I'll stick a lump on it.
Dad,
please let this one come in.
Hello?
Sorry, sweetheart. I was miles away. What were you saying?
When you're there, but not there. The National Gambling Treatment Service is here to help. Search Be Gamble Aware for free confidential advice. Start to regain control after one call or chat.
Broadband speed matters. Broadband speed matters. Bet you think you've got super fast, hyper fast, or mega fast broadband? Chances are you're operating at the sluggish speed of your average snail. G-Network delivers 900 meg upload and download speeds. That's 13 times faster than the London average broadband. Join G-Network for just £22 a month. G-Network, or the Gigabit Network, as we like to call it. Contract applies £48 a month after initial 3-month term.
Ever wonder what life is really like as a professional hockey player?
Shot, save, rebound, score!
On the Spit and Chicklets podcast, NHL veterans Ryan Whitney and Paul Bissonnette join Barstool sports writer Rear Admiral to share stories from their playing days while bringing their outspoken brand of commentary to the day's top headlines.
Yeah, that cameo request turned into an SNL skit. So
crazy.
How about that?
Thinking of you studying, I just picture two pit bulls barking at each other.
Search Spit and Chicklets on TuneIn to listen.
This week's On the Media, as cable news hosts watched chaos in the Capitol, they struggled to find the right words to describe the perpetrators.
Protesters, rioters, domestic terrorists, insurrectionists.
I don't want to call them protesters anymore. I want to call them rioters or mobsters.
Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
Today's top stories got you down, lighten the mood with TuneIn's uplifting selection of music stations for every taste. Head to the music section to get your groove back.
The antibodies are coming along and will start.
Want someone to talk to about your latest audio adventures? So do we. Share what you're listening to on TuneIn by tagging us in Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram posts. Then make sure to follow TuneIn on your platform of choice so we can share all your favorite news stations, events, podcasts with you. Get social, discover new things, and spread the love of listening with TuneIn.
Follow us.
Hashtag.
It's social.
Get social.
The next time you're in the TuneIn app and playing your favorite station or podcast, just keep scrolling down on the screen. From there, you can quickly revisit your recent listening or explore personalized and similar recommendations based on your interests and location. Scroll and explore more on TuneIn.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
Will technology lead us out of this crisis?
We don't know how many companies can accept people back on their roster.
The Fed seems to have really flexed its muscles.
There's still a coronavirus risk.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
To wring out that buy the dip mentality, that takes time.
Are we looking at a more damaging break in the labor market?
Does the shape of the yield curve matter?
We're looking at late 2021, early 2022, where it really feels quote-unquote normal.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Equity markets taking their time to figure out a direction today. Not so much bond markets, though. The 10-year yield is now at 116.49. We have lots to talk about market-wise. Also, Washington, D.C.-wise, Joan O'Sara is going to speak to us a little bit later on the difference between conservative speech and active terrorist planning. We'll also have Jeannie Zaino of Iona College and Rainey Ryu, who is chair of International Development Finance Club, but also was a Paris Agreement negotiator, will talk to us on the outlook for climate change and John Kerry's potential brief. Let's get all the latest business news now from Greg Jarrett.
Well, thank you, Bonnie. Stocks are a little changed right
Robert
now.
Anderson is a
Investors
Puerto Rico
follow the
resident.
latest news on the economic recovery and vaccine rollout. Also, political news. Howard Marks, Oak Tree Capital Group co-chairman and co-founder, tells Bloomberg he knows why stocks keep going up in spite of what might seem like a risk-averse environment.
The military and telecom background.
And Treasury actions, and specifically the reduction of the Fed funds rate to zero, has had a very coercive effect on the market. It has required people to invest because they don't want to sit around with cash, money market fund, bank deposits, all earning zero. They don't want treasuries at less than 1 or higher grade bonds at 2. And so they've had to push out into risk assets.
Let's take a look at those risk assets. The S&P 500 is a little changed down 1. The Dow is a little changed down 12. The Nasdaq's up 0.1%, up 14. The 10-year is down 5/30 seconds. Yield
you can go 15 minutes from here and find areas that are devastated.
West Texas Intermediate crude's up 0.8% at 52.65 a barrel. The COMEX gold down 0.6% at 18.4020 an ounce. The dollar yen 104.27. The euro $1.2151. The British pound $1.3601. The pandemic housing market rally, a bright spot for the U.S. economy, may already have peaked as the growth in home prices starts to slow. The asking price for a typical single-family home jumped 13.8% last year from a year earlier. That according to an index from House, an investment platform for home buyers. That was down from a peak of 16.5% in late July. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets is underway. Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
Greg Jarrett, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Kind of a quiet opening to the market here, searching for some direction. But we know when we look under the hood, there's always lots of good stories. Let's do that. With Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at a market that's really kind of struggling for direction as much as anything. That said, you can certainly find it in the energy stocks. Given what we're seeing in the oil markets, that's an area that is sort of notable in terms of early trading. The best performer out of the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500, and it's not even close at this point.
They're going to get them set up.
But that said, you really got a pretty even split. 5 groups up, 5 down, and consumer staples, food, beverage, tobacco, really little changed at this point. Beyond that, it's kind of hard to find much that jumps out, except maybe Tesla. If only because, they had that 11-day winning streak that was broken yesterday. It was the longest string of gains since the company went public back in 2010. And now Tesla's kind of picked up where it's left off. The shares are higher by 4.8% at the moment. So the juggernaut just keeps going after a day's interruption. That seems to be how things are kind of shaking out here.
Yeah, you'll want to tune in later on. I'll be speaking with Rob Arnott, who has a bearish call on on Tesla, and we'll lay it all out. Dave, I want to ask you about Las Vegas Sands and what happens now after Sheldon Adelson obviously died this morning. There were attempts at sort of having it be bought, or at least part of it bought, very, very recently, right? Remind us what happened there.
Well, let's face it, when you have somebody at the top of a company who passes away. I mean, it's always a question of, what's the potential for a deal going forward. You have to remember, Adelson has a 52% stake, or had. Certainly his estate still has it, in Las Vegas Sands. So, you have to wonder what happens on the deal front. And actually, that might explain why, the stock really has kind of slipped back a little bit. It was higher before the opening bell, now down 0.3%. One area where you might see more movement in terms of the business is what happens in online gaming. We reported the other day that the company was kind of talking with potential partners in sports betting, and our story noted that Adelson really didn't embrace online gaming the way that a whole lot of his peers have. So you have to wonder what happens as far as the move into the online business, which has become a lucrative area for a number of casino companies. So it may be that the results really show up in terms of the business as opposed to any deal making. At least that's sort of the initial read on the fact.
Let me just remind people, it was actually back in October, the end of October, there was a report. A company spokesman actually came out and said that Las Vegas Sands was considering a sale of its Las Vegas Strip operations, including 2 resorts and a convention hall, and it would have been about a $6 billion sale, but nothing came of that, at least in the last quarter of the year.
Yeah, and now, I mean, it really comes down to, the current acting CEO, Robert Goldstein, perhaps having a freer hand with the company at this point. There's a lot that has to be kind of worked out here, and it's clear that, people aren't expecting anything to happen right off the bat. I mean, given the fact that the stock's down.
Another stock that jumped out at me this morning was Zoom Video Communications. They're seeking to raise $1.5 billion through a stock offering, and why not? The stock's up over 360% over the last 12 months. Seems like a good time to raise capital.
Well, it does, and what's interesting there is you sort of saw an initial reaction with the stock falling. It was down as much as 2% in early trading today. And it's pretty much come back. It's little changed really at this point. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, let's face it, they're not the only company out there looking to raise some money. Lemonade, that insurance software maker backed by Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, among others, that has had a run that you could argue was just as impressive as what Zoom was able to do last year. It's also planning to sell shares not only for itself, but also on behalf of some of its executives and investors. And you're seeing a little bit more of a move there. Lemonade down about 2% at the moment.
I see yields in Europe going a little bit crazy today, Dave. What's behind that?
Why do you do it? Well, it helps me sleep at night. We're living in a time where if you look at Europe, the story has been for years now, negative yields below zero. I mean, the UK is kind of rethinking whether it wants to kind of go in that same direction. It's certainly been an issue that's up there. And, to the extent that you get an economic recovery in Europe, you have to wonder, what's going to happen in terms of these below zero yields and the costs that go along with them.
It was not treated well by the United States when they first got here.
It really is a matter of
Puerto Rico
sort
can
of watching
continue in
how
the way that
things
it's
unfold.
always been.
So, Dave, you're resting up for earnings, which really kick off
like
the banks Friday?
Yeah, a little bit. And, the day before, you get the first reports that are for the fourth calendar quarter. Delta Airlines is going to be out with their figures. And they've kind of been at the forefront the past couple of years in terms of sort of signaling the beginning of earnings season. Then you get BlackRock and First Republic as well on Thursday or Friday is really when things happen with Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo all due to report. Wells Fargo, by the way, raised to buy from neutral UBS today, so they're not waiting for the numbers to move. And you take a look at how the shares are doing, and people are clearly reacting to that. Wells Fargo up about 2% at the moment.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We appreciate that. As always, we'll be back in the next hour with the small cappers. I noticed that they're trading well today. I'm going to be fascinated, Bonnie, to hear from Delta Airlines just to get a sense of how they think, as vaccines roll out and maybe the economy opens up, how they think their customers are going to come back over what time frame. It'll be fascinating to kind of get their thoughts, and we'll get that Thursday. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C., our 99.1 studios for world and national news with Nathan Hager. Nathan.
Paul, the House is racing toward a second impeachment of President Trump. But first, lawmakers plan to vote on a resolution urging Vice President Mike Pence and the cabinet to force the president out by using the 25th Amendment. President and Vice President, though, pledged to work together through the end of their term after meeting last night. Some Republicans argue a censure motion against the president would be less divisive. Democrat Tim Ryan tells ABC News.
Matters can't get worse. We just had a potential coup attempt. We just had domestic terrorists try to stop the election process. It can't get any worse.
The FBI is warning of plans for armed protest in D.C. and all 50 state capitals up to and possibly beyond next week's inauguration. Alex Del Carmen is with the Tarleton State University School of Criminology.
It's extremely concerning. If you look at the nature of the FBI memo to law enforcement across the United States, it is essentially telling law enforcement to get ready.
The Department of Homeland Security says it's going to start ramping up inauguration security tomorrow, a week before the event, and President Trump has approved an emergency declaration for the nation's capital. The Trump administration is looking to free up more coronavirus vaccine.
We're calling on our governors to now vaccinate people age 65 and over and under age 65 with a comorbidity, because we have got to expand the group.
Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar tells ABC's Good Morning America they also plan to release second doses of vaccine now that manufacturing is more predictable. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
The Sky Broadband sale is now on. Get super reliable, super fast broadband and anytime calls, all for the super low price of just £25 a month. So everyone can stream shows, get together online and smash that high score. It's now just £25 a month for 18 months plus $19.95 setup. For new and existing customers, hurry to sky.com. Offer ends January 27th. Prices may change during contract. Sky Fibre areas. Speed varies by location. Average download speed 59 megabytes. Speed to hub. More at sky.com.
Can you see yourself creating the buildings of the future? Can you imagine building brands as a digital marketer? Can you imagine helping to save lives? With a T-level, you can. A post-GCSE qualification that gives you in-class knowledge, real-world experience, and the confidence to start being who you want to be. Meet Next Level You. T-Levels, the next level qualification. Find out more at tlevels.gov.uk.
Daddy, do you want to play?
Play 3 up front today. I can see us scoring a truckload.
Daddy, let's play a game.
Game should be in the bag. Think I'll stick a lump on it.
Dad, please.
Please let this one come in.
Hello?
Sorry, sweetheart. I was miles away. What were you saying?
When you're there, but not there. The National Gambling Treatment Service is here to help. Search Be Gamble Aware for free confidential advice. Start to regain control after one call or chat.
Under Armour ask, what type of person are you? The type at your desk thinking of exercise or making today count and already 5K in?
The type that sees it's 7 degrees out thinks forget it. Well, so what? Bring it on.
So which are you this Tuesday afternoon?
The type making excuses.
Or out pounding the streets of London, fully kitted out in Under Armour Rush cold gear. You give it all, we give it back.
Get winter ready with cold gear from underarmour.co.uk.
Broadband speed matters. Broadband speed matters. Bet you think you've got super fast, hyper fast, or mega fast broadband? Chances are you're operating at the sluggish speed of your average snail. G Network delivers 900 meg upload and download speeds. That's 13 times faster than the London average broadband. Join G Network for just £22 a month. G Network, or the Gigabit Network, as we like to call it. Contract applies £48 a month after initial 3-month term.
Makeup pads and cotton wool balls. Really good at unblocking pores. And really, really good at blocking drains. Wet wipes. Brilliant for cleaning up all sorts of bathroom messes. And brilliant for making a complete mess of our sewage system. If it's anything other than toilet paper, bin it, don't block it, and keep life flowing. Thank you. From Thames Water.
One of about 12
Get
million
social. Get
couples
social.
who get married
It's a new year.
every year.
Why not try
Unlike
something
their
new?
parents' generation,
Like
they're
following
not
TuneIn on social
those
media
villages
to stay in the know with all the amazing audio to come in 2021.
Follow us.
Facebook, Twitter,
or even Instagram at TuneIn. Classified ads in
The news that makes history.
Outrage. That is the reaction from some lawmakers right now after this week that the money
just the past 24 hours, the situation in Syria has
3 key points make up the Metro Manila Council.
The games that make legends.
Thanks to growing internet and smartphone usage,
Music and podcasts that make your day better.
Hello, everybody. It's Bill Bird. It's time for another episode of the Thursday afternoon, just before Friday, Monday morning podcast. And I am just checking in on you, seeing how your week's going.
Live in the moment with TuneIn. Stay informed with live news from CNN, MSNBC, and more. Follow your team and soundtrack your life with music, podcasts, and over 100,000 live radio stations. News, sports, music, podcasts. Hear it all on TuneIn.
Anshu and Sumit's marriage was initiated
The next
by
time
their
you're in the
parents,
TuneIn app and
but
playing
modern
your
Indian
favorite
couples
station or
like them
podcast,
have
just
more
keep
input from
scrolling down the
previous
screen.
generations.
From there, you can quickly revisit your recent listening while discovering personalized and similar recommendations based on your interests and location. Listening to CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News Radio? Scroll to see a schedule of upcoming programs. Listening to today's hits? Scroll to see the latest songs you just heard. Listening to a live NHL game? Scroll to see when your team's next matchup is. Scroll and explore more on TuneIn.
Time flies.
This
when
week
you're
on
in
the New
love.
Yorker Radio
Just
Hour, we'll
1.5
try to understand how the
months
United
after they
States got the
first met
pandemic
online,
so wrong.
Our
response never had a national plan. When the Obama administration turned over documents to the incoming Trump administration, among them was the playbook for a pandemic, and the Trump administration just jettisoned that.
Lawrence Wright joins us on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
Data sucks much faster, and what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Economics.
All
this doom and gloom is out there. Finance.
Do you see this as a technical correction? What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
The Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Lots and lots of talk about what the Fed should and shouldn't do.
Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and the names that shape the world's markets.
We speak with Professor Schiller of Yale University.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Listen today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The S&P is little changed, with consumer discretionary and energy sectors gaining, while utilities and industrials lead declines. Europe Stock 600 index traded little change. Commodity prices mostly are up, and benchmark treasury yields ticked a bit higher. After Bitcoin suffered steep declines yesterday, the largest cryptocurrency continued its wide swings today, right now down 0.3% at 33.88 per. Let's check the markets as they stand right now. Start with the S&P, which has now moved up 0.1% up 3. The Dow is up 0.1% up 27, and the Nasdaq's up 0.2% up 25. The 10-year is down 6/32, the yield 1.1%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 1.1% at 52.85 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 0.5% at 18.4230 an ounce. The dollar yen 104.28, the euro $1.2156, the pound $1.3599. San Francisco's office market is being hit so hard by the pandemic that by some measures it's worse than the global financial crisis or dot-com collapse. The city's office vacancy rate reached 16.7% at the end of 2020, up 11 percentage points. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
This focus on fixed income is brought to you by PIMCO, a global leader in active fixed income. Learn how PIMCO creates opportunities for investors at PIMCO.com/bonds. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Consult your investment professional before investing. Taking a look at the Treasury yield market, certainly been a lot of action there in the Treasury bond market. The 10-year about 1.17%, so a big move in the Treasury markets. Let's get some color on that. And there's absolutely nobody better to do that with than Ira Jersey, Chief U.S. Interest Rate Strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence. Ira, great timing to have you on board here. What are your thoughts about what we're seeing in the Treasury market over the last several days?
Yeah, so obviously with the Georgia elections going toward the Democrats, there's this feeling that there's going to be additional fiscal stimulus, and that has two effects on the Treasury market. One is that it's seen as maybe being an enhancement to economic activity and maybe inflation on a going forward basis. So that's number one. And number two is that it will have to be funded with new debt. So the Treasury Department will have to issue more Treasury bonds, and the expectation is for longer term Treasury bonds, like 7-year, 10-year, 30-year bonds. And so both of those things, I think, are pressuring the market. And just from a pricing perspective, 1.17%, as you noted, Paul, where we are right now, is a very important technical level. Beyond that, you're looking at another 10 basis points above it, and above that, you're looking at this year's high yield, which is closer to 2%. So we're nudging up against some pretty important levels here amidst this little bit of optimism about the potential recovery in the economy.
Well, and of course, all eyes will be on that 1 o'clock auction today, right? 10 years, it looks like, for the most part. It looks like all 10 years, right, Ira?
Yeah, so today's auction, we had the 3-year auction yesterday, 10s are today. This is a reopening, so this is more bonds of the November 2030 note. I think that the auction might go okay, because one of the things that you're seeing in the market the last 24 hours is an underperformance, so higher yield of the 10-year than any other portion of the curve. So you see the 7-year, 10-year portion of the curve is doing worse, and I think that that's a setup for today's auction, where you have dealers and some other people who might bid for this are getting out of their risk positions, so they're able to bid more aggressively. So I think the auction will go okay, mainly because of that we're trying to price for it at the moment.
Ira, when you talk to institutional investors out there, do they believe that the 10-year is poised to move up to that 2% level, or do they think that this lift in rates is perhaps just a temporary move?
So there's very mixed opinions, but there are a lot of people who fear that. So when you look at what people are doing in terms of hedging strategies, you do see a lot of hedging in the options market for yields to be higher. Now, one of my fears is that you could wind up getting a significant pullback. Like, let's say that there's another risk-off event, either around the inauguration or maybe the Federal Reserve disappoints, or something else happens that causes risk-off. I think the fact that you do have people leaning into the yields going higher could mean that you get a very significant snapback. Will we see sub 1% yields? in that kind of environment, I think it's possible, but the next stopping point would be just under 1% at 98 basis points. Institutional investors, generally speaking, are a little bit worried here that rates might be a little bit higher. So you look at some of the survey information, and it seems like people are getting a little bit more skeptical that yields can remain this low forever.
We just got word, Ira, that Janet Yellen's confirmation hearing for Treasury is planned for January 19th, which is actually obviously the day before the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. Really interesting. It looks like they might be trying to fast-track some of these in case there's impeachment business to get to. Will Janet Yellen have any trouble? Will she be confirmed by the panel? No problem?
I would think that she'll probably be confirmed. I mean, obviously there might be some Republicans
around the time that Elizabeth Warren switched parties, she became a fierce opponent of a Republican drive to make it much harder to file for bankruptcy. She fought that for a decade.
Confirmation hearings can be interesting in terms of what, how she might be different than previous Treasury secretaries, because she does have not only time at the Fed like a few other Treasury secretaries, but importantly, there has been some friction between this administration and the Federal Reserve. So I think a lot of the questions might be, how closely do you anticipate working with the Fed? Do you think? I think the Republicans may even answer, can you be non-biased and still have the separation of the Fed and the Treasury Department? Like, should there be a more like a darker line instead of a grayer line
and their bonuses and their practices?
Why should the U.S.
Ira, what do you believe? What's the market kind of feeling about Fed Chairman Jay Powell? He has time left in his term. What do you think President-elect Biden at that point will be President Biden will do as it relates to the Fed Chairman?
That sort of catapulted
I think he's done a great job personally.
National stardom, particularly
I think a lot of market participants think he did too. There is a vocal minority who think that he's been too easy and that the Federal Reserve has overstepped its bounds. I'm a little less concerned about that given the reforms that occurred under Dodd-Frank with the Treasury Department needing to approve emergency measures by the Fed now. So I think there are a certain amount of checks and balances today that didn't exist a decade ago. And I think that's a positive
Nevertheless,
sign.
she was victorious.
If Jay Powell wants to be reappointed, I suspect that President Biden would reappoint him. He's proven, I think, that he's a decent communicator. He's been able to bring things together, and I think he's a pretty level-headed guy. I was actually quite surprised, to be fair, when President Trump nominated him, because he was more of a mainstream pick, and I thought that President Trump would pick someone a little bit less mainstream.
Curious as to your thoughts on what happens with Fannie Freddie. Mark Calabria apparently wants to stay on. It looks like he won't get to stay on. That perhaps somebody like a Susan Wachter
Warren finally endorsed Hillary Clinton.
Might come in there. Will that impact other parts of the market at all if there is a change to the large mortgage giants?
I think there could be anyone, and that's an interesting question. I think, Bonnie, and I think it depends on who winds up in that seat and how
but
they.
She was wrong.
What new policies are going to affect the market because of these changes in administration, whether it's at the Fed or the Treasury, or you mentioned mortgages. So the FHFA, which is the regulator of the GSEs, like what is going to be the push there, right? So
in the Donald Trump era,
Fannie and Freddie
Elizabeth
won't
Warren
necessarily be going
been
public, which is something that Donald Trump and his administration wanted to happen. So maybe there's more of a utility model that the Biden administration might create
Warren actually found herself rebuked by Mitch McConnell.
So there's still a lot of uncertainty there. And will the market move? Yeah, I think the market could reprice certain instruments depending on what those policy actions are. But I think at this point it's a little bit too early to tell.
Nevertheless, it's interesting to think back on these last 4 years, Ira. The Federal Reserve, the executive branch, concerns that
really
the president and the executive branch exerting undue influence over the Fed. What do we know about President-elect Biden and maybe how he views the Fed?
I think he's probably going to be a little bit more mainstream. I mean, more like President Obama and most of the presidents before him. The political establishment, they have an agenda, and the Federal Reserve is supposed to be above that agenda. It's one of the reasons why it's a separate institution, and and the governors of the Federal Reserve have very long terms. I think that most level-headed politicians are, realize that
the question for
I want to jump in because the president is
can
about to speak. In fact, this happened a few moments ago. We're getting playback, but it is the very first time that we are hearing from President Trump since last Wednesday's events. So let's listen in to what he has to say.
They want to bring together coalitions for political victory. That's the challenge.
It's been tremendously successful, far beyond what anyone thought. We're stopping in large numbers the drugs coming into the country for many, many years and decades. We're stopping a lot of illegal immigration. Our numbers have been very good. There does seem to be a surge now because people are coming up. Some caravans are starting to form because they think there's going to be a lot in it for them if they're able to get through, but we're able to stop it. The wall has made a tremendous difference. I think some of you are coming with me, but the wall has made a tremendous difference on the southern border. As far as this is concerned, we want no violence, never violence. We want absolutely no violence. And on the impeachment, it's really a continuation of the greatest witch hunt in the history of politics. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. This impeachment is causing tremendous anger. And you're doing it, and it's really a terrible thing that they're doing. For Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to continue on this path, I think it's causing tremendous danger to our country, and it's causing tremendous anger. I want no violence. Thank you very much. Thank you.
President Trump leaving the White House to go to Joint Base Andrews in his way to Alamo, Texas. Absolutely fascinating how the president decided to address reporters today, Paul. He made no mention, as far as I can tell, of last week's events, and just at the very, very, very end happened to throw in a throwaway line that he didn't want any violence. But before that, he had mentioned the word witch hunt again, and a lot of this rhetoric that has really been incendiary.
Yeah, no change there, and no real acknowledgement of last week's events. Preferring to talk about the border wall as he heads down to Alamo, Texas, presumably to inspect that. And Trump campaigned in 2016 with a promise to construct a wall along the southern border of the U.S. and that he'd make Mexico pay for it. Mexico did not pay. The administration has built about 452 miles, though much of that has included replacing existing barriers. President Trump financed a project in part by redirecting military spending. So, it's a nuanced story there, but choosing to focus on the wall and not the events.
I also want to point out, Paul, that he mentioned that he didn't want violence, never violence, but he mentioned it in relation to impeachment, saying impeachment plans were causing tremendous anger, as if the anger had just only now happened.
Yeah, exactly. So, not addressing the issue directly. It's the first time, that we've heard from the president since the uprising, since the insurrection in the nation's capital last week, and again choosing not to address the issue directly with his comments to reporters, but focus
indirectly or directly.
Yeah, exactly right, perfectly said. But again, going back to what was one of his original base promises, which is to build a wall. So just fascinating how he is approaching it here. So anyway, that was President Trump on the tarmac as he heads down to Alamo, Texas. We want to thank, prior to that, Ira Jersey, Chief U.S. Interest Rate Strategist, giving us his thoughts on the interest rates. Right now, let's get world and national news with, where are we going? We're going to...
We may get that
let's go to Greg Jarrett.
Jarrett. Yeah, he'll certainly give us an
update
update on the markets.
Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg, take it away.
I'm here for you.
Thank you,
stocks
sir.
are mixed today. Benchmark, always. Benchmark Treasury 10-year notes yields rose to a 10-month high as investors mull the prospects of the economic recovery and vaccine rollout. We have Lauren Goodwin, New York Life Investments multi-asset strategist and economist. A couple of things she says have to happen to sustain any rally.
The first is that Democrats have effectively promised promised for additional $1,400 stimulus checks to eligible Americans. A second chunk of financing, though, that Democrats will be looking for is state and local government support, as well as an expansion of unemployment benefits and vaccine funding.
Let's look at stocks. The S&P is up 0.2% up 7. The Dow's up 0.1% up 46, and the Nasdaq is up 0.3% up 42. The 10-year is down 6/32. The yield 1.16%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 1.3% at 52.95 a barrel. The COMEX gold down 0.3% at 18.4550 an ounce. The dollar yen 104.20. The euro $1.2163. The British pound $1.3627. Citigroup has named Gonzalo Luchetti head of the U.S. consumer operations, where he'll oversee efforts to beef up the bank's wealth management arm and ink more digital partnerships. Luchetti was most recently head of Citigroup's consumer business in Asia-Pacific region in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, let's take a look at Bitcoin. Something just a little bit different. Why not? Let's move to the digital currency space. We're looking at 33,846 today. It is down about 0.3% after a couple of very down days in the last few days. Let's bring in somebody who knows a lot about this. Meltem Demirors is Chief Strategy Officer for CoinShares Group. About $750 million in the digital space. Meltem, thank you for joining. What do you make of the flows into the likes of Bitcoin over the last few days and weeks, and the amount of sort of new vehicles that have cropped up, including Anthony Scaramucci's new Bitcoin ETF?
Yeah, absolutely. So great to be back on the show. And I want to make a minor correction. We actually at CoinShares hit a record high of $3.9 billion in AUM. So it's quite a step up from the $750 million we had about a year ago. And actually on the first trading day of the year this year, we hit a new high where we saw over $200 million of our exchange traded products traded in one single trading session. January 4th, big day, so I'll definitely say there's a lot of interest in crypto ETPs and crypto vehicles.
Well, so just Meltem, let's clarify exactly that. You had $750 million a year ago. You have what now, and has it been due to flows or due to the massive gains that we've seen in the likes of Bitcoin?
Absolutely. So we have $3.9 billion in assets under management in our exchange-traded products, and that is a result of two factors, as you alluded to. One factor, obviously, is the price rise, but in addition, we've seen a tremendous amount of inflows into our ETPs as well as other structured products. And again, what we're seeing is a tremendous amount of participation from not just crypto-native asset managers like ourselves. We are currently the second largest asset manager in the world in our industry. But we're also seeing traditional asset managers, hedge fund managers, Anthony Scaramucci, One River in the UK, entering into this market, and in significant size, we're talking about multi-billion-dollar vehicles here. So new inflows combined with the price rally has resulted in a tremendous amount of market activity across the board.
Talk to us about the trading that we've seen, Meltem, in Bitcoin, just specifically. It's had just extraordinary rise up here. I'm just looking at it, back in March when a lot of risk assets were melting down, it was about $5,000, and here we are, just under $34,000 after peaking at over $40,000. Talk to us about what we've seen in the price of Bitcoin, maybe even the recent volatility in
of associating with, quote, those absolutely, and the trading story, we have a large trading desk at our firm. We're trading about 5 to 7 billion of notional volume every month. What we've really seen last year around this time, the majority of Bitcoin trading volume was in the Bitcoin Tether trade pair. Tether, as some of your listeners might know, is a blockchain-based digital dollar. So the majority of volume we saw was happening during Asia trading hours in the Bitcoin Tether trading pair. Over the last 12 months, and particularly in December and the start of this year, what we've seen is an uptick in volume in the Bitcoin USD pair, which is now the most dominant pair. And in addition, a lot of trading activity has shifted to US and UK market hours. So to us, that's one of the clear indications that volume is starting to shift. And then the last piece I'll add that's important to note is, as many may know, the CME in 2017 launched a Bitcoin derivatives market. They have a futures contract and an options contract. In December, the Bitcoin options contract at CME hit an all-time high of $1 billion in monthly expiry, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of uptick in volume on that CME venue, whereas historically in the past, the majority of options and derivatives volume had been on crypto-native platforms, particularly those based in the Asia-Pacific region. We're now starting to see a lot more participation in USD-denominated markets tied to the legacy banking system and accessed by institutions through their existing FCMs and their existing brokerage providers.
How do you pick a pair, Milton?
Entering the United States.
You know, obviously we quote Bitcoin in terms of it versus the US dollar. You talk about it versus Tether and others. What are the options, I suppose, these days?
Trump escalated. So Tether is a dollar, right? Every Tether is equal to a dollar. It's just the dollar is on a blockchain, so it trades natively on chain. It's very similar to the concept of a central bank digital currency, except for central bank issuing it. In this instance, it's a private company issuing it with the dollars held in reserve and collateral. And really, I think the importance of the shift from Tether to USD is an indication that more of the people who are accessing capital markets and crypto are coming from bank accounts rather than being crypto-native trading firms. So I think that's really the key insight for us there. In terms of trade pairs, you know, Bitcoin is a very deep, very liquid market at this stage. 3 years ago, not so deep, not so liquid. And today, it's a 24/7 global market. It's quoted primarily in USD, but obviously there are hundreds of trade pairs in various currencies. But the USD trade pair is really the most prominent one, and that's certainly the one we track at our firm.
Extraordinary story. Meltem, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate getting the update and the update on the assets under management. That is just extraordinary over the past 12 months. Meltem Demir's Chief Strategy Officer for CoinShares Group. Really, Vonnie, just that the growth in and the depth of the marketplace, as Meltem was mentioning, to me, that's one of the most impressive things, the depth of the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, you know, let's not forget that Bitcoin itself is up 330% over the last 12 months. So, you know, that accounts for some of that. But also, these are such tremendously volatile assets, Paul, you know.
Yeah, but as presumably, as you talk to the bulls, as this market becomes deeper and broader and perhaps more liquid with more players, that becomes a little bit more stable. We'll see. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C., our 99.1 studios for World and National News with Nathan Hager. Nathan.
Well, Paul, President Trump, as you just heard moments ago, has made his first public comment since the riot on Capitol Hill that has sparked a second drive to impeach him.
It's really a continuation of the greatest witch hunt in the history of politics. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
In brief remarks to reporters outside the White House, the president said, quote, "We want no violence, never violence." He says Democrats' impeachment plans are causing tremendous anger. He also says his remarks at the rally that preceded last week's incursion were totally appropriate. The president's now headed to Alamo, Texas, where he'll tout the completion of 400 miles of border wall with Mexico. The Trump administration is calling on states to make coronavirus vaccine available to anyone over age 65 now in an effort to speed up a slow inoculation rollout. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis from the Villages, Florida, says in his state they're already doing that.
Putting seniors first was the right decision. If you look at Florida in terms of the number of shots that we have for senior citizens, we are leading the country by a country mile on this.
The Trump administration also plans to lift its hold on vaccine doses that had been set aside for second shots. First confirmation hearing is set for one of President-elect Biden's cabinet nominees. Sources tell Bloomberg Treasury designate Janet Yellen will go before the Senate Finance Committee on January 19th. That is the day before Biden will be sworn in. Yellen has sparred with Republican lawmakers in the past as chair of the Federal Reserve, but she is expected to win easy confirmation to lead the Treasury Department. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
What does it take to change the world? If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right or getting started. All of these take either a lot of people, changes start with little changes, or massive one way or another. But the Julian Assange, all he needs
and
is
help
one
you
room,
to feel better,
an internet connection,
inside
and the
and out.
world will listen.
So you'll be healthier and more able to fight diseases. Download
Assange
the free
is located
NHS
here,
weight loss
and more
app
specifically,
now.
right here.
Search Better
From
Health.
that location,
Let's do
he's
this.
posted government secrets, classified documents, and leaked emails from some
This
of
week
the
on the
world's
New
most
Yorker Radio
powerful
Hour,
people.
we'll try to
And in
understand
doing
how the
so,
United
he's been
States
labeled
got
a
the
hero,
pandemic
a villain,
so wrong.
a nihilist,
Our
and
response
everything in between.
never had
This is
a
how an
national
Australian
plan.
program
When the
sequestered
Obama
in the Ecuadorian
administration
embassy in
turned over
London became one of the most
documents to the
influential
incoming Trump
and notorious
administration.
people
Among
in the
them
world.
was the playbook for a pandemic.
Born in 1971
and
in
the Trump
Townsville,
administration
Australia,
just jettisoned
Assange has
that.
always been
Lawrence
on the
Wright joins us on the
Living
New
in
Yorker
over 30
Radio Hour
homes
from
by the time he was in
WNYC
his
Studios.
mid-teens,
Listen to
Assange,
this
along with his
episode
mother and
on
half-brother,
TuneIn.
finally settled down in Melbourne. His
How
introduction
do you
to
keep up
hacking
on the
started
latest
at
NBA
16
news,
when he was given
analysis,
a
and
Commodore
rumors?
64,
Again,
which he
Kawhi
attached to
Leonard,
a
fifth
modem.
straight game
He
of the
attended the
series. He's
University of
at 30 or
Melbourne,
more
where
on
he
his
studied
podcast,
programming,
The Low
physics,
Post.
and mathematics. He
ESPN's
never
Zach Lowe
graduated,
brings
but
in the
that doesn't
sharpest
mean
minds
he
in
didn't get an
basketball to
education.
break down all the
By
stories that matter.
1991, Assange hacked into the Pentagon, U.S. Navy, and other branches of the U.S. government. In 1996, he was caught by the Australian Federal Police and charged with over 30 counts of hacking and computer-related crimes. He didn't get any jail time, but he was fined $2,100.
I think the first taste of
It's a
what
new
will
year
come later was
and
the
a new
hacking
you.
of the
Fulfill your
program, and
resolutions
that
with
really
TuneIn
sort of
Premium.
foreshadowed a
Need some
healthy
inspiration to
skepticism
restart your
of
home
the
workout
use
plan?
and abuse of
Get the
technology
adrenaline
by
pumping
government.
by listening to
That's Vernon
TuneIn's
Silver,
non-stop
A
channel.
reporter for Bloomberg's investigation.
Assange's youth as a hacker laid the foundation for him to start WikiLeaks in 2006. But
Then
what
wind
is
down
WikiLeaks?
while catching up on
It's a
commercial-free
website
news
that
from
posts
CNN,
unfiltered,
Fox News
useless
Radio,
classified
MSNBC, and
What
more.
separates it
Start
from
your
every other media
2021
outlet
right
is that
by
they have no
upgrading to
editorial
TuneIn Premium
pilot.
today.
With a publication like the
Be
New
your
York
daily
Times,
fix of hockey
information
talk
comes in,
on the Locked On
they take that
NHL
information,
podcast. Join a
package
rotating
it, then
cast
disseminate
of
it
geek
for the public
insiders
to
for
see.
daily shows
WikiLeaks,
analyzing
however,
all the latest
cuts
news,
out the middleman.
rumors, and predictions around the National Hockey League.
Blackhawks are on the clock, and they haven't submitted a pick because, much like real life fantasy drafts, everybody takes the full allotted time.
Yeah.
In almost 2 hours, and we're only halfway through the draft.
Especially the number one pick. Like, why does the number one pick?
Search Locked On NHL on TuneIn to listen.
But every story
America's
starts with a
pastime
source,
is a
and
big deal.
Assange has
It's
some
also
unconventional
big
sources.
business. Baseball
Julian
Biz is the
Assange does not
podcast
hack
about the
the
business
farm.
of baseball,
He is
covering
the
everything
recipient
from
of people
MLB
who are
history and
insiders,
operations
give them
to
secret
interviews with
documents
players,
or hack
agents,
emails from
owners,
foreign
scouts,
That's Eli
umpires,
Lake.
and beyond.
We have the regular baseball season. We
And
get
there was
all
no source
involved
bigger
with
for
everything
Assange
with
than Chelsea
the World
Manning.
Series.
He
Thank
used to
goodness.
be
That's the
known
most
as U.S.
exciting thing you
soldier
have.
Bradley
But then
Manning.
you say,
In
what happens
2010,
after that?
Manning
Well,
provided
you
Assange
search
and
Baseball
WikiLeaks with
Biz
hundreds
in
of
one
thousands
word
of
on
leaked government
TuneIn to
documents.
listen.
WikiLeaks quietly began
Ready for the
releasing the
loudest,
documents in
most
February of
correct sports
2010,
opinions
then
in the
made big
history of the
headlines in
spoken
April by
word.
posting what is now known as the collateral
It's
murder
already
video.
dirty again, but that's what we like.
On Party Take, aka your favorite new sports podcast, Big Cat and PFT commenter bring you daily topics, special guests, and a money-back guarantee for a better life.
Passes are so bad.
And those leaks
it
were
was
just
pass
the beginning.
interference,
They
but
went
the
on to
pass was
post
so
more than
bad, you're like, but it
90,000
can't be
leaked
pass
documents
interference.
known as
Search
the
Pardon
Afghan
My
war
Take
logs,
on TuneIn to
390,000 documents known as the Iraq war
Got your
logs,
resolutions
and a
all
quarter
set?
of a million
Why
private
not add
messages
another to
between
the list
diplomats
and follow
called cables
TuneIn on
in what is now
Facebook,
known as
Instagram, and
Cablegate.
Twitter.
And tune in.
These leaks were
The
met with
easiest
very
way to
real
discover
ethical
new
questions.
audio to soundtrack
Problem
the new year.
publishing those cables was that a number of confidential sources.
If you know
from US
anything
diplomats
about the
could
world
face
of
real
professional
danger of being
soccer,
exposed.
you know they don't call it
Then
Premier
Secretary
League
of State
for
Hillary
nothing.
Clinton
On
drove
the
the
Two
point home
Robbies
that
podcast, listen to former players Robbie Mustoe and Robbie Earl discuss the top storylines and matches from the most exciting soccer league in the world.
I mean, it's a sackable offence, by the way.
Shortly after Cablegate, the Swedish government issued an arrest warrant for Assange on allegations of rape and molestation.
Search the
He claimed
Two
the allegations were
Robbies using the
fabricated
number
to get
2
him
to
extradited to the
listen.
United States, a claim the U.S. government
If
denied.
you ever need a break from
Either way,
24/7 and news
next
coverage
move
on
was.
TuneIn. Remember, you can explore TuneIn's awesome library of music stations, perfect for every mood and activity. Just search music to find what
What
vibe
was
you're
supposed to be
feeling.
an office and an embassy
The
is
next
now
time you're in the
Assange's
TuneIn app and
self-imposed
playing
prison
your
to this
favorite
very
station
day.
or
But
podcast,
that doesn't
just
mean
keep
he slowed
scrolling
down.
down the screen.
Since being
From there,
trapped in the
you can
embassy,
quickly revisit
WikiLeaks
your
has released
recent
files
listening
about
while
Guantanamo Bay
discovering
prisoners,
personalized and
Syrian
similar
political figures, and
recommendations
the draft
based
of the
on your
Trans-Pacific
interests and
Partnership.
location.
And then
Listening to
came the
CNN,
2016 US
MSNBC,
election.
or Fox News Radio? Scroll to see a schedule of upcoming programs. Listening to today's hits? Scroll to see the latest songs you just heard. Listening to a live
Over the
NHL
course
game?
of 68
Scroll to see
days,
when your
WikiLeaks
team's next
released
matchup
20,000
is. Scroll
confidential
and explore
Democratic
more
National
on
Committee
TuneIn.
emails. In terms of the presidential race, if you look right here, when Assange released the first batch of emails, Trump actually takes his first lead against Clinton.
This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. The S&P edges a smidge higher, with energy and financial sectors gaining. Tech and communication services are the biggest decliners. Europe stock 600 traded
From the emails, we now know Hillary Clinton's campaign manager makes risotto, and also how the DNC squashed Bernie Sanders' campaign. One thing we don't know is who gave Assange the stolen emails in the first place.
And the Nasdaq's up.
Many leading Democrats say they suspect it was the Russians.
The 10-year's down 9.30 seconds. The yield 1.17%.
Cybersecurity firm
West Texas Intermediate.
But Assange
oil is up 1.4% at 52.96 a barrel. And Mexico is down 0.4% at 18.43.
So this is where we stand today. The public still doesn't know who provided the emails to WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Assange is still running WikiLeaks and still releasing documents. In March 2017, he started publishing documents from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence called Vault 7.
The CIA, the agency charged with finding and keeping our top secrets, can't keep its own secrets.
As long as Assange has a connection to the world, no government secret will be too far from exposure.
That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Julian Assange is still in the embassy.
Bloomberg opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 10:48 on Wall Street. Time for Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined today by Joe Nocera. He's a Bloomberg Opinion columnist joining us. Joe's out with a fascinating column today on a very important topic, and that is, what liability should the social media companies like Twitter, like Facebook, and others have for the content that appears on their platform? And of course, that is absolutely front of and center right here as President Trump has been temporarily, at least, taken off of both Facebook and Twitter for some issues as it relates to last week's uprising in the Capitol. Joe, thanks so much for joining us here. Love to get your thoughts here about this very important topic.
Well, that's a pretty broad question. My core feeling is that we just should not live in a world where four Silicon Valley bros, you know, named Tim and Mark and Jack and Sundar get to decide, you know, who gets to be on their platform and who doesn't get to be on their platform, or what kind of speech, I should say, gets to be on their platform. So, you know, there's a fundamental problem there that hasn't been solved. And, you know, Facebook has 15,000 content moderators. 15,000. And yet there's still all kinds of hate speech on there. Obviously, this uprising was in no small part planned on Facebook. And Facebook is always behind the curve in trying to get these things off, and in many cases leaves them on because they don't violate their terms of service, and we barely know what their terms of service are.
Sorry, Joe, continue.
No, you go, your turn.
All right, my turn. I was going to say, what responsibility exactly does the likes of Mark Zuckerberg and his company, which is in the private sector, it's not a government company, it's a private company, how much responsibility does he and the company have?
Well, do you mean from a legal standpoint, or do you mean from a societal and moral standpoint?
From a societal and moral standpoint first, because I imagine some of the reason we saw these actions being taken in the last few days is actually from a legal standpoint, not from a societal standpoint. But that's, opinion aside.
I don't think that's true.
You don't?
The key thing is, they have no legal liability because of Section 230 of the 1996 Communications. The Communications Decency Act of 1996. So they have no legal responsibility because they have immunity. They're just viewed as a platform, and anybody can put anything on there, and the person who puts it on has the liability. Now, I think this is a huge problem because it doesn't give these guys any incentive to take off the incendiary kind of posts that, on the one hand, have been very damaging to to our politics and to our cultural norms. But on the other hand, they drive traffic. They make money for the companies. So the companies don't have a ton of incentive to take that stuff off. And so, my argument really comes down to this. If you're a pharma company,
one of the reasons you want your drugs to work, not the only reason, but one of them is because if they don't, you're going to get sued to smithereens.
With only a smartphone.
And that helps keep companies in line.
It could enable driverless cars to take us there.
If Facebook and Twitter
5G stands for fifth generation
Apple and Amazon all have the same
insanely fast and can accommodate a lot more
possibility.
But the reason it's being called revolutionary is because 5G will allow connected devices,
I believe, change the way they think and act about.
Right now, we're living in a world where
what they have online.
Really, it's a one-way experience.
What do you think the appetite is within Washington to eliminate Section 230 of the Communications Act?
I think it's pretty high, actually. All the Republicans want it, although they want it for a stupid reason. They want it because they think of it as a way to punish
5G could end up being 100 times faster than what we have now,
because they claim
that could reach 20 gigabits per second.
Conservative views don't
plain
get
English, that means downloading a full-length HD movie
which is baloney, which is just baloney.
5G will also increase total bandwidth, which we will need in order to accommodate the growing Internet of Things.
Have come around
We're talking about the class of devices like internet-connected refrigerators, thermostats, dog collars, but 5G will enable many more.
Something has to change, and that you can't keep counting on Twitter and Facebook to do this themselves, because they don't have the manpower, and they don't really have they don't have the willingness. So that's what the issue is.
But perhaps the biggest advance
if somebody could figure out a way to modify Section 230 so it
network of driverless cars will need the speed of 5G to ping each other multiple times per second
without getting rid of it entirely. I think that would be a great solution.
Could allow doctors.
Well, here's one for you. I mean, it's not unlimited, this immunity. It specifically accepts federal criminal liability. So what if someone gets up there and argues that, across states, people were planning to meet and carry out violence on members of Congress last Wednesday? There's potential federal liability there.
This may mean you'll see a lot more of these base stations.
That's a very, very narrow slice.
And the new towers may have as many as 100 antenna ports, compared to about a dozen on 4G.
You can put
anti-Semitic
slurs on there to
getting 5G ready is expected to cost providers $275 billion over 7 years in the U.S. alone.
So,
look for the first 5G service to pop up in big cities sometime in 2019.
The amount of legal liability, is very, very narrow for these companies. You're right. If a crime is being planned on Facebook and Facebook doesn't do anything about it, that's a problem. But as a general rule, there's no legal liability.
Joe, what do you expect the response from Silicon Valley to be to some of this mounting pressure for regulating speech?
Well, I think they're not going to be in favor of eliminating 230, but there's a company called Axios, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is an online site that's very aimed at the Washington movers and shakers. Facebook advertises on that site all the time, and their advertisements always say, we want to be regulated. It needs to be further regulated. What they really want is for the federal government to take this problem off their hands, so that so that it becomes a government mandate that certain speech has to be removed. So they don't feel like it's on them, that it's their decision. Actually, the appetite is higher. It's higher than you might think.
Joe, it's a great column. There's so much nuance in here, and I urge everybody to rush out there and read Joe Nocera's column today in Bloomberg Opinion. He is, of course,
exactly the
Joe Nocera, but he's also a Bloomberg Opinion columnist these days, and today's column is Revoke Social Media's Shield, but for the right reasons. Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms won't get serious about cleaning up content until they face liability. He makes a great point, Paul, about how, it's only now, 12 days before the end of the Trump presidency, that Twitter and Facebook are actually booting him off. It does
the timing is not lost on a lot of people.
Yeah, you definitely be a little bit cynical about it. All right, stay tuned. We have a whole other hour for you in which we're going to keep our eye on these markets and, of course, talk a lot more Washington, D.C.
Which is now St. Petersburg. His father was a factory foreman and his mother a homemaker.
If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right or getting started. Healthy changes start with little changes, one way or another.
After getting a law degree from Leningrad
and help you to feel better, inside and out. So you'll be healthier, more able to fight diseases.
When Putin returned to
The
Russia,
NHS has lots of ideas to help you lose weight. So it's better health. Let's do this.
That's Leonid Bershevsky.
Nothing compares to a real holiday, especially when you know that everything's taken care of. The TUI Holiday Promise puts flexibility first, with free changes on summer 2021 holidays. Plus, we have thousands of free kids places to give away. Book your summer holiday with confidence. Nothing compares to TUI. Discover your smile. All protected. Booking T's and C's apply. One free child place per 2 full paying adults, subject to limited availability. Free changes up to 21 days before travel. That's limited holidays. See website for details.
Makeup pads and cotton wool balls. Really good at unblocking pores. And really good at blocking drains. Wet wipes. Brilliant for cleaning up all sorts of bathroom messes.
The apartment bombings
and brilliant for making a complete mess of our sewage system.
Injuring more than 1,000.
If it's anything other than toilet paper, bin it, don't block it, and keep life flowing. Thank you. From Thames Water.
How do you keep up on the latest NBA news, analysis, and rumors?
Again, Kawhi Leonard, 5th straight game in the series, he's at 30 or more.
On his podcast, The Low Post, ESPN's Jack Lowe brings in the sharpest minds in basketball to break down all the stories that matter.
It's so obvious that people talk around it, but forget it sometimes. And that's that this is a very strange season. So we have teams that have had a 9-month layoff and teams that have had a 2-month layoff. We have guys search The Low Post on TuneIn to listen.
It's a new year and a new you. Fulfill your resolutions with TuneIn Premium. Need some inspiration to restart your home workout plan? Get the adrenaline pumping by listening to TuneIn's non-stop channels. Wind down while catching up on commercial-free news from CNN, Fox News Radio, MSNBC, and more. Start your 2021 right by upgrading to TuneIn Premium today.
If you ever need a break from 24/7 news coverage on TuneIn, remember you can explore TuneIn's awesome library of music stations perfect for every mood and activity. Just search music to find what vibe you're feeling.
Or prison.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
But he ran afoul of President Biden.
The Fed action, essentially unlimited quantitative easing.
Companies taking aim at coronavirus vaccines and other treatments.
This could be a lower for longer hit.
Market sell-off will once again.
Market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
A lot of people don't expect that the economy will reopen in full.
Annexation and invasion, as well as oil, gas, and trade between former Soviet republics.
In moments, we're going to get a coronavirus update from our Michelle Cortez here at Bloomberg. We'll also be speaking with Jeannie Zaino as we get the first comments from President Trump since last Wednesday's events in the Capitol and before an impeachment vote tomorrow. And Rami Ryu will join us. He was a Paris Agreement negotiator on what John Kerry's brief will look like if and when he is the climate czar. Let's get now Bloomberg Business Flash from Greg Jarrett.
Lonnie, we're sponsored this hour by New Jersey Institute of Technology, providing industry partners with Washington-focused research and innovation services through its New Jersey Innovation Institute. More at NJII.com.
Russians took
stocks edge up and benchmark Treasury 10-year note yields are above to a 10-month high. Investors mull the prospects of the economic recovery and the vaccine. Michael Gavenberg, whose chief economist, tells Bloomberg he sees markets faring well in spite of the pandemic.
Said about crushing the protest movement immediately we can find weak spots, but over the next few years, Russia's economy tumbled.
Fairly good resilience to this third COVID wave.
The price of oil fell drastically.
I think it's being watched.
The ruble hit a new low, and America
yes, we're in the green right now. The S&P 500 up at 10% up 4.
Despite all
the Dow's up 0.2% up 50, and the Nasdaq's up 0.2% up 26. The 10-year's down 10.30 seconds. The yield 1.18%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 1.5% at 53.03 a barrel. COMEX gold is down at 18.4170 an ounce. The dollar yen 104.21.
Similar views
the euro dollar 21.57. British pound dollar 36.19.
Even though Putin
sources tell us
any
Janet Yellen's confirmation hearing as Treasury Secretary is planned for January 19th in front of the Senate Finance Committee. That's just one day before President-elect Joe Biden is due to be sworn into office. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now.
Possibility of a president
Paul
until
Sweeney.
2024.
Great, Jared. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Commonwealth, supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with the solutions they need to grow a thriving business. Commonwealth, go where you grow. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. A very, very good day in terms of relative performance for the small cap stocks. Let's get some details. We do that with Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at?
The Russell 2000 index is up 1.2%. So smaller companies are adding to their lead at the start of the year over larger ones. The S&P 500 is only up 0.1% in today's trading. Now, the biggest gain in the Russell belongs to Vox International, whose ticker is its first name, VOXX. The seller of car audio equipment has risen more than 36% after reporting fiscal third quarter results. Sales for the period surged 83%. La Jolla Pharmaceuticals, ticker LJPC, has risen 32% after licensing 2 drugs to a German company, Payon. La Jolla will receive $22.5 million up front and as much as $109.5 million later, along with royalties. And Plug Power, ticker Plug, PLUG, has added 16%. The maker of hydrogen fuel cells agreed to a joint venture with France's Renault to build delivery vans in Europe. They aim to start production by early next year. Now, one of the Russell's steepest declines belongs to Mimecast, ticker MIME, M-I-M-E. The security software maker has lost more than 10%. Mimecast disclosed that unnamed hackers hijacked its products to spy on customers.
Wow, that is dark. Dave, thank you very much for that. And the stories continue. It really is just phenomenal what's going on out there in corporate America. It's also phenomenal what's going on out there in terms of distributing the coronavirus vaccine. Let's bring in Michelle Cortez, Senior Health Science and Medical Technology Reporter for Bloomberg. The latest, Michelle, seems to be that they want to drop the age at which people can now, at least in New York, get the vaccine from 75 to 65. Explain to us where we're at.
This is something that's actually happening as we speak. We're hearing that the Trump administration is not only going to be recommending that states drop the age to 65, but also that they don't hold back that second shot that we've been hearing about so much that you need in order to get fully protected. The point of doing this is a gamble, basically, that we need to get the vaccines out to everybody so that we're getting some protection because the virus is spreading so quickly and the devastation is so great in the U.S. right now. But it is completely a gamble in terms of how that's going to have an effect on the pandemic, number one, and also how states are going to be able to handle this. It is already a mass effort. There's already cracks showing up as we're just trying to vaccinate, medical workers and nursing home residents.
Jack Ma is Asia's richest man and most recognizable business tycoon. He's the chairman of Alibaba, China's e-commerce giant, and one of the 10 largest companies in the world.
All right, Michelle, so we have 8 days until a change in administration. The Biden administration comes in.
Big
Do we know
words
what
from the man some call Asia's Jeff Bezos.
President Biden's
He's
strategy
confident,
is as it relates to vaccinations and dosing?
The average CEO.
Yes. So the Biden administration's policy is don't hold back that second dose and let's lower
This
the
is
numbers
how a
and
poor
just push it
school
out there
teacher
as fast
went
as
from
you
the
can.
classroom
That
to being
goes
one of the
against
most
what the Food and
influential
Drug Administration
multi-billionaires
and the
in
World
the
Health
world.
Organization has said, and what the Trump administration has been recommending. Now, of course, the
Ma
Trump
was born in
administration,
China's
for
southeastern
perhaps
city,
the first
Hangzhou,
time
in
that I'm aware of,
1964.
has really
His
pivoted
parents
now
were traditional
and is
musician
going
storytellers.
recommending what the Biden administration
As a
has said
teenager,
that
he
they
started to
think
learn
is
English from foreign
vaccines
tourists
have
after China
quantity
opened up
over
in the late
quality.
1970s.
Again,
And then for 9 years, Jack Ma hung around outside the Hangzhou Hotel, which is now called the Shangri-La. He would get up at 5 a.m. to talk to travelers.
That's Bloomberg technology reporter Lulu Chen.
in order to do it.
And I cover China internet for Bloomberg.
But now everyone seems to be on the same page.
Ma failed China's National University entrance exam twice before being admitted to local
it may seem very
college.
naive, but
He
why isn't
graduated
there
in
someone
1988.
in a state office,
He applied for
in any
30
state or
jobs
all
and got
states,
rejected,
literally
including
counting
from the
and putting in a
fast food giant
database the number that
KFC.
needs to go to this nursing home, that nursing home, all of the nursing homes, and then, the doctor's offices with patients above 75. Why is it not simple to do this by age?
I believe that
then Ma got a job at a local university and taught English there for about 5 years, earning just $15
I'm sure
a month.
many of your listeners and perhaps you guys have
On the
looked at
side,
your own
he started a
family
translation company with
members.
several
I have
friends.
people in various states,
During
and
a
I have
company
read
trip to
all
the
of
US in
those policies that
1995,
tell me
Ma
that,
had
which
his
is why I
first
know
encounter
there's
with the
54
internet
million
at a friend's
Americans
place in
aged 65
Seattle.
and older, and I can tell you how many there are in
searched
New
the
Hampshire,
first
which is where my
word of
parents
beer.
live. But the bottom line is the actual rollout of that is so much more
it's easy to
complex.
spell.
And not only that, it
And I
becomes,
see beers
as you're trying to
from
do
Germany,
it,
beers from
again, it
USA,
levels up
beers
one more
from,
time. If you're going to say
Japan,
only age
there's no
75
beer
and
from
older,
China.
So
with
he
another
searched for the
health
word
concern,
China instead
what
and still
happens to
couldn't
all
find
people who
anything.
don't have a
And that
doctor
got
that
him
they're seeing
thinking.
all the time?
He wanted to
You need a
build
doctor's
something that
note
would
in
put
order to be
China on the
determined
world's
that you
map.
have a
He
health
started
concern.
China
Should it be
Pages,
only
a yellow
certain
pages-like
hospitals or certain
website, but it
doctors
didn't
have
take off.
access to those
Then
shots?
Ma joined a
How
government
is it all
agency
gonna
in
roll out?
Beijing to help set
Those
up a website.
additional pieces, they all have plans in place, but it's just a mess.
By
to try to do it,
1999,
and it adds
the internet
these
stock
layers,
boom
these
had gripped
hurdles
Wall Street,
of complexity
and back in his
that's
Hangzhou
slowing down the
apartment, Ma
process,
decided
which
to
is
try
why,
again. With his
we have
wife and a group
about
of
10
friends,
million doses
Ma
that
raised
have been
$80,000
distributed or
and
that have
set
been
up
gotten into
Alibaba,
arms,
a site
and
that
that's like
allowed
it's
businesses
about
to sell
a
stuff
quarter
to
to
each
a
other.
third of how many there actually out there.
Michelle, about 30 seconds left here. What is the expectation? How will things change when the Biden administration is seated?
Well, hopefully the Biden administration will be giving more money and clearer
By 2000,
direction and
Alibaba had
kind of
raised
facilitating
$25
these
million from
recommendations that they're
investors,
making.
including
At
Goldman
this point,
Sachs and
really the
SoftBank.
issue is going to be one
He had
of
no
money
business
when it comes
plan.
to the states. They do know what they need to do, but you have to pay
And,
someone
zero
to
revenue.
rent out your sports stadium
But
so you can set up a
his
vaccination
eyes
clinic.
was
There's a lot of
very
money and
strong.
coordination that's going into this. I think the states know what they need to do. It's just
In
a matter of getting it
2003,
done. And in order
Alibaba
to do
started
that, you
Taobao,
need
a
clarity,
platform for
direction, and
individual sellers to trade with each other,
Interesting.
and publicly
Fascinating. I
declared
just saw a
war
tweet from
against
Steve Cohen,
eBay, who had
the owner of
started
the
to make a
Mets,
foray into
saying
China.
later this
Jack Ma
month
has
he will
this
make
famous saying
Citi
that
Field, the home of the
Alibaba
Mets, available
is a
for
crocodile in the Yangtze River,
vaccination. So
whereas
we're starting to see
eBay is
more
a shark
stories
in
like
the
that around the
ocean.
country.
And
Michelle
if they
Cortez,
fight
thank you so much
eBay in the
for
ocean,
joining us.
then they'll
Michelle
lose.
is a
But
senior
if they
health
fight them in
science
the
and
Yangtze
medical
River,
technology
then they
reporter
have a
for
home-based
Bloomberg News,
advantage.
joining us on the phone from Minneapolis, giving us the latest on the pandemic and
In
the all-important
2007,
vaccination
just 1 year after
schedule.
it forced eBay
Right now,
out
let's
of
get
China,
world and national
Alibaba
headlines
debuted
from
its
our
business-facing
Washington,
division
D.C. studio.
on the
Here's
Hong Kong
Nathan
Stock
Hagen.
Exchange.
Paul, thank you.
But
While
it
Democrats
delisted
push
5 years
toward
later as
impeaching
its
him for a
performance sagged.
second time, President Trump is headed to
But in
Texas
2014,
to tout the border
Alibaba
wall
raised
with Mexico.
$25 billion
Bloomberg Surf
in the
Chapman
world's
reports
biggest
from
IPO in
Washington.
New
As his
York.
helicopter waited to take his Air Force One, the president said the wall is having
After
a great
achieving
impact
dominance in the
against
business of
caravans
e-commerce
of
in
would-be
China,
immigrants.
Alibaba
And then he
has
added
been
this.
building an internet empire worth $472 billion, with businesses in cloud computing, online video streaming, movie production, healthcare, sports, retail, and even news media.
Alibaba buying into South China Morning Post
President,
really
who for
raised
most of his
eyebrows.
4
This
years
is the
held
largest
impromptu
English
press conferences
newspaper
at the
in Hong
helipad,
Kong, and it
walked
shows
away
that
from
Jack Ma's
questions today.
ambitions weren't
In Washington,
limited to
Chapman,
e-commerce.
Bloomberg Radio.
He wanted
Secretary of State
influence
Mike Pompeo
not
has
just
confirmed for the
Chinese
first
users,
time
but
that
also
Al-Qaeda's
overseas
second in
users as
command was
well.
shot to death on the streets of
The
Tehran
US has
last
criticized
August.
Alibaba for
Pompeo
allowing
disclosed the
companies to
death
sell
of Abdullah
counterfeit and
Ahmed
poorly made
Abdullah at the
goods.
start of a
But in
speech
China,
aimed at
it enjoys
highlighting
the favor
Iran's
of
links
Chinese
to the
government.
terror group. He
It's part
didn't
of
say
Ma's
who was
company
behind the
philosophy.
assassination, but last November, the New York Times
Jack
reported
Ma's an
Israeli
extremely
agents did
fortunate
it at
man
the
for
behest
jumping
of
on
the
the
United
internet
States.
sector so
The former
early.
Minneapolis
Note that
police
this is a
officer who
person
held
who
has no coding skills at all. He's a natural showman
three other
and a
ex-cops
gifted
charged in his
public
death.
speaker,
Scheduling
and really
orders
able
filed
to
today say
convince
Derek
others to
Chauvin will
believe in
stand
his
trial
vision.
alone in March due to the
Last
pandemic,
vision
while
of
the
growing
three other
Alibaba,
officers will
to be
face
the
a jury
world's
together
fifth-largest
in
economy,
the summer.
faces strong competition
Sheldon
at home and
Adelson has
abroad.
died. Son
It
of a
will require
Boston
more
cab
than
driver,
just
built the
naked
largest
ambition
casino
and
company
charisma.
in the world and
But Ma
used
is
his wealth
great
to
at
support
getting himself
Republican
in the right
candidates. He
place
was
at the right
87
time.
years old.
So
Global
far,
News,
it's
24
working
hours a
well.
day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right, but getting started. Healthy changes start with little changes, one way or another. and help you to feel better, inside and out, so you'll be healthier and more able to fight diseases. The NHS has lots of ideas to help you lose weight. Search Better Health. Let's do this.
Whether you're thinking of moving to this, or escaping to this, or getting a bit more space for them, Barclays mortgage experts are here to help you keep moving, even at weekends, every step of the way. Find out how much you can borrow in as little as 15 minutes without affecting your credit score. Search Barclays Mortgages. Barclays, make money work for you. Subject to application, financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's apply.
With up to 25% off selected homewares and electricals at Sainsbury's, give your home the perfect New Year refresh. From stylish bedding and scented candles to statement dinnerware and kitchen appliances. There's up to 25% off selected homewares and electricals until the 17th of January. Subject to availability at selected Sainsbury's stores. Excludes centrals and locals. T's and C's apply.
Want someone to talk to about your latest audio adventures? Well, so do we. Share what you're listening to on TuneIn by tagging us in Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram posts. Then make sure to follow TuneIn on your platform of choice so we can share all your favorite news stations, events, podcasts with you. Get social, discover new things, and spread the love of listening with TuneIn.
Follow us. Hashtag Get Social. Get social.
New year, new beginnings. Sounds like the perfect time to try TuneIn Premium on for size. Listen better in 2021 with commercial-free news from CNBC, CNN, Fox News Radio, and MSNBC. Exclusive ad-free music channels for your new year. And less ads on over 100,000 radio stations from around the world. Don't settle for same this year. Search Premium to upgrade today.
Need your daily fix of hockey talk? On the Locked On NHL podcast, join a rotating cast of league insiders for daily shows analyzing all the latest news, rumors, and predictions around the National Hockey League.
The Chicago Blackhawks are on the clock, and they haven't submitted a pick because, much like real-life fantasy drafts, everybody takes the full allotment of time.
Yeah.
In almost 2 hours, and we're only halfway through the draft.
Especially the number one pick. Like, why does the number one pick?
Search Locked On NHL on TuneIn to listen.
Today's top stories got you down. Lighten the mood with TuneIn's uplifting selection of music stations for every taste. Head to the music section to get your groove back.
But speaks out about the horrors of higher education, saying colleges...
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll try to understand how the United States got the pandemic so wrong.
Our response
never had a national plan. But these were not when the Obama administration turned over documents to the incoming Trump administration. Among them was the playbook for a pandemic, and the Trump administration just jettisoned that.
Lawrence Rice joins us on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn.
Contrarian to Silicon Valley's biggest
Want to know what's happening in the soccer, football universe? Pass it over to the ESPN FC podcast to hear the worldwide leader in sports break down news, highlights, and analysis from the most popular sport in the world.
Going into this, they're just not going to scare anybody.
Yeah.
Zinedine Zidane said it's like a final because if they lose this game, then they have 1 point.
That's Lizette Chapman.
Search ESPN FC on TuneIn to listen.
He and his Stanford friends made their
Ready
first
for the
big
loudest,
splash in
most correct sports opinions in the history of the spoken word.
Feels great. We got it clean the other day. It's already dirty again. That's what we like.
On Pardon My Take, a.k.a. your favorite new sports podcast. Big Cat and PFT Commenter bring you daily topics, special guests, and a money-back guarantee for a better life.
Passes are so bad. It was pass interference, but the pass was so bad, you're like, but it can't be pass interference.
Search Pardon My Take on TuneIn to listen.
But Teal was just
America's pastime is a big deal. It's also big business. Baseball Biz is the podcast about the business of baseball, covering everything from MLB history and operations to interviews with players, agents, owners, scouts, umpires, and beyond.
We have the regular baseball season. We get all involved with everything with, the World Series, thank goodness. That's the most exciting thing you have. But then you say, what happens after that? Well,
Search Baseball Biz in one word on TuneIn to listen.
The next time you're in the TuneIn app and playing your favorite station or podcast, just keep scrolling down on the screen. From there, you can quickly revisit your recent listening or explore personalized and similar recommendations based on your interests and location. Scroll and explore more on TuneIn.
And the Ad Council.
The market's in focus every business day. The Bloomberg Markets Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn.
Now, there's sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to.
Market sell-off blowing global once again.
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
What's the thought on Apple here?
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
There's very disturbing dynamics at work.
Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn. Subscribe today at BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or iTunes.
Startups and research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology are fueling the innovation economy. And few people are better positioned to see what's on the horizon in New Jersey than physicist and state representative Andrew Zwicker.
How technology is transforming our financial sector is revolutionary. And so much of that is in New Jersey. We are innovators when it comes to agriculture. There is opportunity now for great transformation in how are we going to grow food in an ever-growing population. How do we turn urban centers into agricultural centers? Autonomous vehicles is another one where we have some of the world's leading experts, and how this will transform how those who are either elderly or are visually impaired, mobilely impaired, start to use autonomous vehicles to transform their lives and have access to transportation they could have never had before.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu/research.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The S&P's edging a bit higher with energy and consumer discretionary sectors gaining, while healthcare and communication services are the biggest losers.
And he didn't just help
Europe Stock
Trump
600
financially.
traded
He gave
little
a
change. Let's take a look at the markets now. The S&P is up a
Trump
quarter of
at
a
the
percent, up
Republican
10.
National
The
Convention.
Dow's up a quarter of a percent, up 82, and the Nasdaq's up 0.4%, up 53. The 10-year is down 9/30 seconds with a yield of 1.17%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 1.6% at 53.06 a barrel. COMEX gold's down 0.4% at 18.43.10 per ounce. The dollar yen 104.18. The euro $1.21.61, and the British pound $1.36.25. Boeing is finally emerging from a crisis that engulfed its 737 MAX program after 2 fatal accidents, only to face worsening problems for another marquee jetliner. That would be the 787 Dreamliner. The U.S. aerospace giant failed to deliver any 787 aircraft for a second straight month in December.
It was reported that Thiel was unhappy with the direction of Trump's presidency.
Jet's
Ever
carbon
since,
composite
he's been
frames,
months
the stock
making no public appearances, no statements, and staying out of the spotlight altogether. Although there have been suggestions that Trump could tap Thiel
This
for a
is
top
Bloomberg
intelligence
Markets
post
with
or
Paul Sweeney and
ambassadorship
Bonnie
with
Quinn
no
on
indication
Bloomberg
except-
Radio.
And it is time to talk markets once again now. Let's bring in Brent Shuby, Chief Investment Strategist for Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management.
Whether Thiel takes
Brent,
a new
it's been
position
quite
or
a
simply
few months.
continues as a
It's
board
been,
director at Facebook and
crazy
Palantir, at just
times
50
here
years
in the
old,
United
he's
States.
primed
The
to
markets,
wield
though,
some
seem to have
serious
lively,
influence
just
in technology
gone higher
and
and higher,
politics
these
for
equity
decades
markets.
to come.
And more recently, we've been getting a bit of a shift in bond markets. What's the main decision that you've had to make over the last, say, 4 weeks?
Well, I think to your earlier comments about kind of the markets moving higher and some of the issues that are still out there, I want to point out that the markets discount more into the future. And so the markets are thinking about the end of COVID-19, hopefully, and now it's getting back out to public, and those brighter days ahead in the future. And I think that as you invest money, as you think about those things, certainly there has been some troubling data out. There's been some troubling things happen, which have happened in the last 4 weeks. But from an investment perspective, I think it's important to point out that you always need to be looking ahead. And I think the last 4 weeks we've had to focus on that quite a bit, making sure that we're looking ahead into hopefully the next few months when the world looks just a bit brighter and is operating on multiple cylinders of growth. And so I guess in a way to answer your question, the last 4 weeks, certainly looking at the data, but looking ahead more so, and that's what the market is doing right now. It's looking ahead to what happens in the future, and it's seeing a brighter one ahead.
All right, so a brighter outlook ahead. Where are you going? Where are you allocating capital, Brent?
Well, so I think for the last 3 years, technology growth stocks have been the only game in town. And kind of ties into my cylinders of growth commentary, because I do think next year will be or this year I should say now, we're in the new year, will be the first year in many, actually 3, that we've operated both in the U.S. and the globe on multiple cylinders of growth. And by that, I mean back in 2018, we were kind of introduced to the trade war. That was designed to slow global growth, and it was designed to harm manufacturing and exports around the world. And that actually had a blowback into the U.S. And so if you think about it, technology was really unimpacted by that. It was the place of earnings growth. Growth was narrow, and the market was narrow. Those two things were aligned. As you look into 2021, that hopefully will be off the boil. So COVID, I should say, also kept that going. COVID actually in the beginning narrowed the economy, narrowed the markets. Technology was kind of the only game in town. And recently you've seen the market broaden out because the economy is broadening out. And so we continue to think that's a backdrop in 2021. That means that things that haven't done as well, like cyclical stocks, like value stocks, like small cap stocks, which started doing better in Q4, will continue to do well into the new year. And that's where we're focusing most of our attention on.
That's fascinating. So what kind of value plays are out there that you see then?
Well, from a broad perspective, we use broad-based ETFs and mutual funds for the most part. So we are investing along the lines of just value stocks in some of those sectors that have been harmed a lot. So think of financials, think energy, think stocks that are just cheaper than some of the growth stocks that have been bid up kind of because rates are low and because they're story stocks with a compelling future. I'm not suggesting that future doesn't come to fruition. I just think 2021 is a year when you kind of get back to some of the things that are a bit more boring, like perhaps industrials, financials, things where things that have been impacted for the past few years because of some of these things that are out there that have kept global growth from firing on all cylinders, which, as I mentioned before, I think in 2021 that alleviates.
So, Brent, I guess one of the issues for a lot of people as they think about equity markets is market cap. The big cap names you talked about have been such good stories for a long time. And as we broaden out our view, how are you viewing small cap, mid cap stocks? Do you still see, is there opportunity there?
Now comes the hard part.
Yes, I mean, I think they've certainly, so in the fourth quarter, small and mid-cap stocks, the index we look at were up 24 and 30% respectively. I'm not suggesting that large caps aren't a bad story. I think the S&P was up 12%. So it's not that there isn't still opportunities within some of those other segments. It's just that I think in 2021, small and mid-cap stocks, and value stocks for that matter, have further room to run. Look, growth versus value is at an all-time extreme. And I think that's been logical for the reasons that I mentioned. But as you think about 2021, think about more monetary policy. The Fed is not going to stop. They have to have credibility in the future. They need 2% inflation. The Fed's QE is designed to make you take risks. Fiscal policymakers are not going to stop. You have COVID hopefully alleviating its impact on the rest of the economy. You have an inventory rebuild that has to happen. And you have some pent-up demand from consumers who actually, certainly in the aggregate, have saved money. There's still people who are in trouble, and hopefully the stimulus gets them through and then they get jobs back. But you have an economy that's going to be operating on all cylinders. And to us, that means this recent rotation that we have seen continues into 2021 because earnings growth will broaden out. And technology won't be the only game in town. And so that's where we're kind of focused.
Would you go so far then, Brent, as to be short some of these growth stocks like Tesla, for example?
No, that's not our we're long-term investors. We take a long-term approach, a long-term outlook. We still own large cap stocks.
Well, I suppose what I'm really asking is, do you think they're going to sell off massively? You may not take a position on it given what you do, but do you think they're going to sell off?
No, I don't know if there's a massive sell-off out there. I think, and I've equated this in the past to 1999, but let me make a caveat. I don't think things in some of those stocks are anywhere near they were in 1999. There are earnings, there are stories that are there that are real versus what I think happened in 1999. I'm just suggesting that investors, don't lose diversification because I think right now the temptation is high to do so because they've been emboldened by the past. And B, nudge their portfolios in that direction because I think there's the opportunity to add incremental performance above and beyond what they would get by just taking a steady hold, buy and hold kind of perspective.
Hey, Brent, thanks so much for joining us again. We always appreciate your perspective. Brent Schutte, Chief Investment Strategist for Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management, giving us his bullish call on the markets for 2021, and talking about that rotation trade, allocating a little bit more to some of those value stories, cyclical names, maybe even small caps as well. This is Bloomberg.
If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right, but getting started. Healthy changes start with little changes, one way or another.
One way or another.
and help you to feel better, inside and out, so you'll be healthier and more able to fight diseases. The NHS has lots of ideas to help you lose weight. Search Better Health. Let's do this.
Catch the Premier League on Now TV in a year where the title race is wide open.
It's just blistering, it really is.
Tonight, 2 top 6 hopefuls meet at Molineux as Wolves take on Ancelotti's Everton.
Oh, it's a beauty!
And you can watch it live for a one-off price of $9.99. With the Now TV Sky Sports Pass, you only pay for the games that matter to you.
Can you believe it?
Search Now TV Sports. 18 plus, content streamed via internet, full terms apply.
Whether you're thinking of moving to this, or escaping to this, or getting a bit more space for them, Barclays mortgage experts are here to help you keep moving, even at weekends, every step of the way. Find out how much you can borrow in as little as 15 minutes without affecting your credit score. Search Barclays Mortgages. Barclays, make money work for you. Subject to application, financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's apply.
Broadband speed matters. Broadband speed matters. Bet you think you've got super fast, hyper fast or mega fast broadband? Chances are you're operating at the sluggish speed of your average snail. G-Network delivers 900 meg upload and download speeds. That's 13 times faster than the London average broadband. Join G-Network for just £22 a month. G-Network, or the Gigabit Network, as we like to call it. Contract applies £48 a month after initial 3-month term.
If you ever need a break from 24/7 news coverage on TuneIn, remember, you can explore TuneIn's awesome library of music stations, perfect for every mood and activity. Just search music to find what vibe you're feeling.
Need your daily fix of hockey talk? On the Locked On NHL podcast, join a rotating cast of league insiders for daily shows analyzing all the latest news, rumors, and predictions around the National Hockey League.
The Canucks are on the clock, and they haven't submitted a pick because, much like real-life fantasy drafts, everybody takes the full allotment of time.
Yeah.
So almost 2 hours, and we're only halfway through the draft.
Especially the number 1 pick. Like, why does the number 1 pick?
Search Locked On NHL on TuneIn to listen.
Manufacture, produce, and restore.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll try to understand how the United States got the pandemic so wrong.
Our response never had a national plan. When the Obama administration turned over documents to the incoming Trump administration, among them was the playbook for a pandemic, and the Trump administration just jettisoned that.
Lawrence Wright joins us on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
It's a new year and a new you. Fulfill your resolutions with TuneIn Premium. Need some inspiration to restart your home workout plan? Get the adrenaline pumping by listening to TuneIn's non-stop channels.
We pick out the right side.
Then wind down while catching up on commercial-free news from CNN, Fox News Radio, MSNBC, and more. Start your 2021 right by upgrading to TuneIn Premium today.
The torches
Ever wonder what Tony Kornheiser is thinking about today? Wonder no more with the Tony Kornheiser Show, a daily podcast that starts with sports and quickly moves into politics, current events, entertainment, and whatever happens to be on Tony's mind.
No, I didn't buy them. Mother bought them. Whoppers are so good. I like
individually, but not in a.
There's only 3. They only come 3. The portion is.
Search the Tony Kornheiser Show on TuneIn to listen.
America's pastime is a big deal. It's also big business. Baseball Biz is the podcast about the business of baseball, covering everything from MLB history and operations to interviews with players, agents, owners, scouts, umpires, and beyond.
We have the regular baseball season. We get all involved with everything with, the World Series, thank goodness. It's the most exciting thing you have. But then you say, what happens after that? Well, you
search Baseball Biz in one word on TuneIn to listen.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
She has a new book out. It's called American Democracy in Crisis. The perfect time then to talk to Iona College and Bloomberg political contributor Jeannie Zaino. Although the book is under her maiden name, we'll get all the details in a few moments. We also will speak with Rémi Rieu. He was the Paris Agreement negotiator, one of the group of people that negotiated that agreement. How we'll get back into a blackened room and laying out. Now let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash from Greg Jarrett.
Well, stocks are pushing. Let me take a quick look here. Well, stocks are a little changed now. Benchmark Treasury note is up to the 10-month highs. Investors' wealth prospects of the economic recovery and vaccine rollout. And we just had a change a couple of seconds ago. We had been up the S&P 500 by about 0.5%. Now, it's a little change. The S&P is still up just one, though. Dow Jones Industrial Average is up almost 10%, up 24, and the NASDAQ is up a quarter. Up 35. Let's take a look at the 10-year now. It is currently down 9/32 with a yield of 1.17%. West Texas Intermediate Crude is up 1.6% at 53.12 a barrel. COMEX Gold is down 0.4% at 18.43 per ounce. The dollar yen 104.17. The euro, $1.2158. The British pound, $1.3627. Wall Street's obsession with electric vehicles is touching off a new round of public listings, prompting clean tech companies to forge partnerships with powerful allies. Proterra, which makes electric buses and battery systems, said today that it'll go public through a special purpose acquisition company, ArcLight Clean Transition Group. The latest wave of deals between automakers and SPACs comes as Lucid Motors has been in talks to go public via one of Michael Klein's blank check companies, this according to sources. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Heat it up using a very large and powerful transformer.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, the House reconvenes this evening to begin its efforts to oust President Trump. Let's get the latest on how this might proceed. We're fortunate once again to welcome Jeannie Zaino, professor, Bloomberg Politics contributor, and author of American Democracy in Crisis. Jeannie, thanks so much for joining us here. How do you expect this to play out over, the next 24, 48 hours?
Red color.
It's really obviously, as we've been talking about, unprecedented. What we expect will happen today is that we will see by this evening perhaps a vote in the House on this resolution to, I guess the nicest way to put it is encourage Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment. That's largely going to be futile. We don't expect there will be many Republicans that will go along with that, and certainly we don't expect Vice President Pence to move in that direction. There was, in fact, some reporting, unconfirmed as I understand yesterday, that he and the president had met. So we don't expect he will invoke that, which is going to pave the way forward for what the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, promised would be a vote on this one article of impeachment against the president for inciting violence and insurrection against the United States. I think we may see that vote on the floor tomorrow, Wednesday evening, and it's a question as to how many Republicans, if any, go along with it. We think Adam Kissinger, for instance, will go along with it. There may be a few others, but certainly we don't expect that we're going to see many Republicans in the Senate, at least at this point, who will go along with it, at least not enough to get the number they need. But the House certainly looks like it will go forward on that vote tomorrow evening.
Well, Jeannie, I have absolutely no idea how you managed to write a book called American Democracy in Crisis that's coming out right now. You seem to have foretold this. Can you tell us a little bit about what you say in your book without giving too much away as to what some solutions might be?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I wrote it certainly throughout COVID, certainly thought about it many years before. The real focus of this book is not the events of the last week, although the title suggests it might be. It's really about something else, which is the fact that we could be in the midst, for instance, over the last year of the pandemic, and for 6 to 7 months, we have a federal government that was unable to pass a basic bill to provide people and businesses with the support they needed. And so it looks at why the U.S. government is so constantly unable to do things and get things done, why it's so often deadlocked. And this is something I think we're going to see going forward when Joe Biden takes over. And I attribute a lot of that not to Donald Trump or to Joe Biden or any individual in office today, but to James Madison and the way that we built this system to protect liberty without making it responsive to the majority needs. And I think it's something we really have to think about restructuring. I'm certainly not the first person to say this. The framers themselves talked about this right after the passage of the Constitution, and throughout history, scholars have talked about it, but there's been little appetite in the public to talk about restructuring the Constitution to remove some of the divisions that keep us from moving forward. And it's fascinating to me as we watch the president go down to look at the border wall, as he talks about it today, that immigration, something that I don't think we'd have a Donald Trump if Congress and the federal government had been able to address the crisis of immigration in our system for the decades prior to when he came down those stairs in 2016. So I think that deadlock and inaction plays into people's frustration with the system and looking for outsiders and demagogues to solve the problem, which they ultimately can't do in our system.
Well, Jeannie, we have proof of that just as you were mentioning just now, just this evening with this second impeachment move here. I guess the real strategy here for House Republicans is, okay, you pass it, let's say in the next couple of days, then what do you do? Do you immediately send it to the Senate, or do you hold it to allow President-elect Biden to have perhaps freer reign in the or less confusion in the first 100 days of administration? How do you think that's going to play out?
Yeah, it's exactly right. We heard Jim Clyburn over the weekend talk about maybe wait 100 days to take up the trial in the Senate. We heard Joe Biden in the last 24 hours and some of his team say, well, maybe we could do a sort of split, half the day on a trial, half the day on getting my team in place. And so it does present really big challenges for Biden, but also for Americans as a whole. He needs to get a team in place. He would like to get all of his nominees confirmed. He would like to move forward, and so would all of we, on addressing the pandemic, addressing the economic challenges we're facing. Very difficult to do if you've got a Senate that is seated and doing a trial on the former president. And so it does present huge challenges. I'm not sure. We may see a consent decree for them to go forward and split the day if indeed the House impeaches and it moves to a trial. But, I think it would be something to watch for them to be handling something like that, as we can't forget the incoming president addresses a pandemic and huge economic challenges that we are all facing. And the number of deaths in the last week or so have been astonishing. Has to be addressed, and they're going to try to do a trial at the same time. Really hard to imagine.
Jeannie, we're literally out of time, but give us the rundown on where we can find your book and how it's cataloged.
It's called American Democracy in Crisis. It's on Amazon. It's by Paul Grave Macmillan, and I thank you so much because I'm excited about it.
Really enjoy riding.
SAGEHAN, right?
Yes.
There's always a slight change. And as we build them individually
as well,
well,
Jeannie, thank you so
marks
much. That is Jeannie there from Iona College. Let's get now to
most people I know side will have an idea
Nathan Hager for some more DC news.
Bonnie, thank you. President Trump is rejecting blame for the riot on Capitol Hill last week. In his first public comment since the deadly incursion, the president said his remarks before his supporters stormed the Capitol were totally appropriate, and the drive to impeach him now is absolutely ridiculous.
Subtle changes and nuances in design which can change the writing characteristics quite dramatically.
I think it's causing tremendous danger to our country, and it's causing tremendous anger. I want no violence.
The president spoke outside the White House on his way to Texas, where he'll tout the 400 miles of border wall that has been built during his presidency. The House is set to vote as soon as tomorrow on an impeachment article, while Politico reports Pennsylvania Republican Brian Fitzpatrick is pushing a censure resolution. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is calling on the FBI to add anyone who took part in the Capitol breach to the federal no-fly list. In a letter to Director Chris Wray, obtained by the Associated Press, Schumer said the attack amounts to domestic terrorism. After a slow rollout, health officials are encouraging states to make COVID vaccines available to more people. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports.
The Trump administration is trying to speed up the immunization campaign. Shots will now be available to anyone 65 years old and older, regardless of underlying conditions. The recommendations from CDC Director Dr. Robert Redfield follows President-elect Joe Biden's pledge to release more of the available vaccine supply. Operation Warp Speed had been holding back doses to make sure those who got that first shot would be able to get the second one. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Global News on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
This isn't sort of aerospace specific.
If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right, but getting started. Healthy changes start with little changes, one way or another, and help you to feel better, inside and out, so you'll be healthier and more able to fight diseases.
There's various techniques.
Download the free NHS weight loss app now. Search Better Health. Let's do this.
A bronze rod and a flame. We heat the tubes up to the same.
Play 3 up front today. I can see us scoring a truck load.
Daddy, let's play a game.
Game should be in the bag. I think I'll stick a lump on it.
You've got to practice. You've got
Please let this one come in. Sorry, sweetheart. I was miles away. What were you saying?
When you're there,
it's a stage where your tubes start to look a bit like a bicycle.
The National Gambling Treatment Service is here to help. Search Be Gamble Aware for free confidential advice. Start to regain control after one call or chat.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll try to understand how the United States got the pandemic so wrong.
Our response never had a national plan. When the Obama administration turned over documents to the incoming Trump administration, among them was the playbook for a pandemic, and the Trump administration just jettisoned that.
Lawrence Wright joins us on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
Because a machine can't get.
Have you heard the most unscripted, unfiltered, and unhinged sports show in the game? On the Skip and Shannon Undisputed podcast, Skip Bayless, Shannon Sharp, and Jenny Tapp discuss the biggest stories in the world of sports.
Father Time is at least sort of looking over one shoulder right now. LeBron, you remember me?
The one thing, even Skip, because, okay, they cut some games last year. That was 10, 12 games. That he averaged 25, that's another 250, 275
Search
points.
Skip and Shannon on TuneIn to listen.
Want someone to talk to about your latest audio adventures? Well, so do we. Share what you're listening to on TuneIn by tagging us in Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram posts. Then make sure to follow TuneIn on your platform of choice so we can share all your favorite new stations, events, podcasts with you. Get social, discover new things, and spread the love of listening with TuneIn.
Follow us. Hashtag Get Social. Get Social.
A lot of people still get that thrill.
How do you keep up on the latest NBA news, analysis, and rumors?
I can. Kawhi Leonard, 5th straight game in the series. He's at 30 or more.
On his podcast, The Low Post, ESPN's Zach Lowe brings in the sharpest minds in basketball to break down all the stories that matter.
It's so obvious that people talk around it, but forget it sometimes. And that's that this is a very strange season. So we have teams that have had a 9-month layoff and teams that have had a 2-month layoff. We have guys
Search The Low Post on TuneIn to listen.
Today's top stories got you down. Lighten the mood with TuneIn's uplifting selection of music stations for every taste. Head to the music section to get your groove back. New year, new beginnings. Sounds like the perfect time to try TuneIn Premium on for size. Listen better in 2021 with commercial-free news from CNBC, CNN, Fox News Radio, and MSNBC. Exclusive ad-free music channels for your new year. And less ads on over 100,000 radio stations from around the world. Don't settle for same this year. Search Premium to upgrade today.
You don't have to wait until spring training to get back into baseball. Just turn on the Roto World Baseball podcast to stay current on the latest offseason stories, along with scouting reports and strategies for spring training your own fantasy baseball team.
We've seen statistically over the years, baseball is one of the most coin-flippy sports when it comes to the postseason. We talk about a team that's also got the second lowest batting average in the American League.
Search Roto World Baseball on TuneIn to listen.
Save! Want to know what's happening in the football universe? Pass it over to the ESPN FC podcast to hear the worldwide leader in sports break down news, highlights, and analysis from the most popular sport in the world.
Going into this, there's just not going to scare anybody. Yeah. Zinedine Zidane said it's like a final because if they lose this game, then they have 1 point from 3 matches.
Search ESPN FC on TuneIn to listen.
Ever wonder what life is really like as a professional hockey player?
Shot, save, rebound, score!
On the Spit and Chicklets podcast, NHL veterans Ryan Whitney and Paul Bissonnette join Barstool sports writer Rear Admiral to share stories from their playing days while bringing their outspoken brand of commentary to the day's top headlines.
Yeah, that cameo request turned into an SNL skit. So
crazy.
How about that?
Thinking of you studying, I just pictured two pit bulls barking at each other.
Search Spit and Chicklets on TuneIn to listen.
On average, not just one. They're coming out with real skill sets that are immediately hireable and available to them. I think we see an understanding by the faculty and administration at NJIT that we've got to train and educate the whole student, not just their, one side of their brain. And I do think that's sort of part of the DNA today. There's practical and there's sort of academia, and merging those two together and understanding that if we're going to have our young people go get great jobs and have great successful careers, they've got to have both sides of their brain activated. And I think we see that with NJIT.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out.
If you ever saw a wooden surfboard, it was probably hanging in somebody's house.
Nobody was embracing you. Kids
but kind of in the last 10 or 15 years, wood has made a big comeback.
Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
Beautiful.
The hard part
feels great to be on one.
Determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria.
I always had a love for wood
and to continue my education and finish what I started to get my diploma. She never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering
the way they
getting your high
built
school
the
diploma,
stories that come with them, a lot of that has translated over to why we built
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma,
when we first started thinking about building
find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Use in the surf world.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are now fluctuating between red and green. Benchmark Treasury 10-year notes yields rose to a 10-month high. Investors are trying to check out the prospects of the economic recovery and vaccine rollout as they make their investments. The S&P is now down a 10%, down 3. The Dow is little change, down 13. And the Nasdaq's up 0.2%,
go out to our lumber shed, pick a bunch of cedar, put them into a note shop, put glue along the edges, clamp it all together.
West Texas Intermediate crude is up 1.7% at 53.14 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 0.5% at 18.4120 an ounce. Dollar yen, 104.19. The euro, $1.2160, and the British pound, $1.3620. AT&T is in early discussions, according to sources, with a group of banks to raise $14 billion to help buy more 5G
Once that foundation is started, you're basically building up the three-dimensional shape, the outside part of the board, using lots of strips that kind of interlock and fit together.
Now, the Bank of America is said to be leading the transaction again, according to those sources. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg J.
There are frustrations with it, but I think that's one.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
What the color of the wood is telling you.
All right, it is time to have a conversation about the climate. And you can be absolutely sure that under John Kerry, assuming that he is the next climate czar and that all goes ahead without any problems, we will have a very different approach in this country to climate. Remy Ryu was one of the negotiators for the Paris Climate Agreement, and he joins us now. Remy, first of all, what's your anticipation for when John Kerry takes office and how it will manifest itself? It's a new post.
Right here in the state of Maine. They're built 100% by hand by local craftspeople and surfers.
Pleasure to be
There's
with you
a lot of time that goes into these boards.
The momentum growing in the U.S. behind climate.
We wanted to build surfboards that were as hollow as they could be, but still be strong enough to work well.
I clearly
too light and they don't surf well, but too heavy and they don't surf well. So there's a balance point there, and that's where we try to be.
2015, and so a lot of
taking the board off the rocker table. Once the top is gone
back
that
on
is
board,
by far one of my top favorite parts.
Domestically, of course,
it's just
but
you
also on the
and
international stage.
A board and a
so, Remy,
Give us a sense, as one of the negotiators and architects of the Paris Agreement, why is it so important, this agreement for climate change, and what's really the focus right now for this agreement?
There's something about taking a nice sharp edge tool to a beautiful piece of wood and feeling the curls coming off and knowing that every pass that you're making, you're kind of getting it closer and closer to what you have in mind.
But that the emissions are going everywhere, and so we need absolutely need a common framework and way more international cooperation with the Chinese, with Europeans, with African countries.
Laying it over the board, draping it over the edges, cutting it, applying epoxy, and on the board.
A common framework with a clear mechanism. With a ratchet
Once both sides are
another
expanding ambition, drill and router and install the fin box. And on the other side, we drill and put in the leaf plug and a vent. There's a lot of air just naturally inside the board, and that air wants to expand and contract with temperature changes. And that vent has a little piece of Gore-Tex fabric and
hopefully increase emission. And that's what the voice of John Kerry, the voice of Brian D.
Once all that hardware is put in, goes back into the glassing room, we brush a nice, beautiful, thick coat of epoxy over the whole surface. And that we call
Are they speaking to corporate America, corporate France, corporate Germany, and whatever country we might be talking about? Or are they actually speaking to the governments? What can governments do?
It just makes it look like
an interesting point in the Paris Agreement and the way the French government at that time organized the discussion is that it was not a classic intergovernmental UN discussion.
Everything is hard.
We tried to expand and your financial radio.
Really kind of bake it.
We tried to light up each segment of the financial sectors at that time, and then we can measure what is happening. So see what
sustainable and long-lasting and made by hand. Kind of gives you a deeper connection to the product over something you might buy.
Farther in the coming months and years. And so yes. The private sector, private financiers, private corporations are key in this effort. But you need instruments to link public and private, of course, and that's what public
when a customer gets the board, they feel it. They
Remy, one of the first moves from President Trump and his administration was to pull the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement. What were the practical ramifications for that?
We're looking at doing it right and enjoying it.
Well, good news is that it takes 2 years to really come out of such an agreement. So there was still a U.S. team in the negotiation for the last few years, and since President-elect Biden decided to come back, there will be no interruption in the U.S. in the negotiation. But of course, the decision had a lot of consequence on the momentum, and hopefully there was the American pledge with the cities, with NGOs, with corporations taking the helm and doing more. And now we expect the government to come back.
So you were just offering us a little opening there, Remy. You are chair of the International Development Finance Club, and you just mentioned how international banks and intra-governmental banks are very necessary when it comes to things like climate agreements and so on. How does your International Development Finance Club play a part in all of this?
Well, in the way Europe, Asia, Latin America, Africa developed and is now fighting against climate change and against inequalities, you have at the center of our economic system a public financial body, public development banks. Remember, in the US during the 30s, you had this Reconstruction Finance Corporation. That was the instrument, the federal public instruments at the hand of President Roosevelt to come out of the crisis. And so we decided last November to gather them all. There are 450 public development banks in the world. It amounts to $2.3 trillion investments each year. So that's 10% of global total investments that are public and to work collectively. And so we are expecting, we are dreaming of having again a U.S. counterpart, Senator Markey, so active behind the Green New Deal, was present at this Finance in Common Summit, and he supported the Finance in Common Coalition, and we will pursue in 2021 and certainly liaise with all U.S. colleagues to do more.
Remy, how has the pandemic, the global pandemic, impacted the mission of the Paris Agreement?
Well, the pandemic, of course, is slowing down international cooperation, and that's where it's so important to rely on national forces. So, of course, now we have the global framework, the Paris Agreement, that is still alive and very active and probably more vibrant than in the previous years. But we need to have allies, we need to have forces, we need to have institutions in each and every constituency because the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, it's not about international affairs. It's really about the way we produce, the way we consume, the way we live. And what we have to change. And, well, we know we have to do it in France. You know you have to do it in the US. And certainly that was part of the debate in the discussion. And now we have to join forces and do it together.
Remy Rayou, thank you so much for joining us. Remy Rayou, Chair, International Development Finance Club, also a Paris Agreement negotiator. And Bonnie, it's going to be very interesting to see how quickly the U.S. re-engages in this Paris Agreement when the president-elect takes office on January 20th. Clearly is a big part of Mr. Biden's campaign to re-engage on a global scale with our partners to fight climate change. Coming up, Balance of Power with David Weston. He will drive the conversation forward. For Vonnie Quinn, I'm Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg.
If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right, but getting started. Healthy changes start with little changes, one way or another. And help you to feel better, inside and out, so you'll be healthier and more able to fight diseases. The NHS has lots of ideas to help you lose weight. Search Better Health. Let's do this.
Makeup pads and cotton wool balls. Really good at unblocking pores. And really, really good at blocking drains. Wet wipes. Brilliant for cleaning up all sorts of bathroom messes. And brilliant for making a complete mess of our sewage system. If it's anything other than toilet paper, bin it, don't block it, and keep life flowing. Thank you. From Thames Water.
The next time you're in the TuneIn app and playing your favorite station or podcast, just keep scrolling down on the screen. From there, you can quickly revisit your recent listening or explore personalized and similar recommendations based on your interests and location. Scroll and explore more on TuneIn.
It's a new year and a new you. Fulfill your resolutions with TuneIn Premium. Need some inspiration to restart your home workout plan? Get the adrenaline pumping by listening to TuneIn's non-stop channels. Then wind down while catching up on commercial-free news from CNN, Fox News Radio, MSNBC, and more. Start your 2021 right by upgrading to TuneIn Premium today.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
初恋这种事儿多不靠谱啊！
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York to our television and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. The House is expected late today to pass a resolution urging Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump, and then to take up the one proposed article of impeachment tomorrow. President Trump spoke about this just a short time ago on his way to Texas.
We want no violence, never violence. We want absolutely no violence. And on the impeachment, it's really a continuation of the greatest witch hunt in the history of politics. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. This impeachment is causing tremendous anger. And you're doing it, and it's really a terrible thing that they're doing.
We welcome now Anna Edgerton for a report on where this is all going. Well, it doesn't sound like the president is particularly contrite about what's happened, Anna. What is the mood up on Capitol Hill?
In the past 5 years,
it's actually a lot of fear, as we get more information about the attacks, what was behind it.
kind of the organization of some of the people who participated. It's really scary for members who are going to come back today to vote on this resolution asking Pence to remove Trump from office, and tomorrow to vote on impeachment, and next week for the inauguration. So, there are a lot of moments of risk here, and there's a lot of fear on Capitol Hill that this division is just going to continue to simmer and could spill into more violence.
And we hear from a lot of people on Capitol Hill sort of an agreement something needs to be done in response to the awful incidents of last week. Is there any consensus developing, though, on what should be done? Because there's a wide range from this resolution on the 25th Amendment to impeachment to censure to I don't know what.
The Democrats are pretty united behind the impeachment process. We have, I think, more than 220 Democrats, which is almost the entire House caucus, that supports the one article of impeachment that will get a vote tomorrow. But Republicans are more divided. Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, spoke with his members yesterday. He floated a few different options, including a censure resolution and possibly using the 14th Amendment to ensure that Trump would never be able to run for office again.
Okay, Anna, thank you so much for reporting. That's Anna Edgerton, our congressional correspondent here at Bloomberg. For more on the drama playing out in Washington, we welcome now Lara Brown. She is director of the Graduate School of Political Management at George Washington University. So, Professor, thank you so much for being with us. I won't ask you for any precedents because I dare say there are no precedents at all. But as you look at what's developing right now on Capitol Hill, what do you think is the most likely or the smartest course for Congress?
Well, I think that impeachment is absolutely necessary. I would argue that the Democrats probably should have put more articles together than just the one on incitement, because that one on incitement is really about a criminal charge. And while that is an aspect of the impeachment provision in the Constitution, I think there are two other articles that the Democrats could have crafted. One relating to the president's call with the Georgia Secretary of State. That certainly amounted to undue influence and an attempt to overturn a rightfully settled election, which in and of itself is a violation of the Constitution. I think there is also a third article that could have been written about the president's dereliction of duty to respond to the assault on the Capitol once it was underway. There was a devastating inside sort of account of what the president was engaged with, and it appears as though he was too interested in watching live television to respond to the violence and the danger and destruction that was happening on Capitol Hill.
So, Professor, I guess one of my questions is, what is the point? And that isn't to suggest there isn't one, but is it to really just have on the record that this is unacceptable, or is it to change something in the future in terms of President Trump running against or the benefits he might receive?
Well, so I think what is so important is that the House of Representatives actually stands up for itself. So to me, I see this as a confrontation between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And at the end of the day, the executive agreed to, in either sort of explicitly or implicitly, an assault on the legislative branch. And that is something that cannot stand in our system, and the legislative branch needs to push back on the executive and put the president back in his place. So I would argue that the impeachment from the House is absolutely necessary, whether or not there is sort of removal and the Senate trial is that second stage of that process, which may have an impact in either sort of constraining President Trump's actions between now and the inaugural of President-elect Biden, or it could have the possibility after a conviction, after the president is removed, of preventing some of those presidential perks, like keeping him from holding federal office in the future. But I actually think the most important thing the Congress needs to do is to ensure that this president does not have access to the president's daily brief, which is something that former presidents are able to request after they are out of office.
Professor, as a practical matter, if in fact articles of impeachment are voted on, doesn't there have to be a trial in the Senate? And does that constrain not President Trump, but the incoming President Biden and what he can get done in Congress over the next 2 or 3 months.
Look, this trial can be fast or slow. The reality is they don't need to have a week-long trial after this president is out of office. They could have a trial in the Senate where essentially the House managers argue for a half a day in favor of the articles, and the defense argues for a half a day, and a vote is taken. I think that we are missing the point if we are concerned about the expeditiousness with which this trial could take place.
But if you really did just do a half day for each side, does that really address the witch hunt claim we just heard President Trump make? That is to say, there are 74 million people, more or less, who voted for this man for president. Are they going to be satisfied with something that one-day trial, fine, you're done?
There are 81 million people who voted against this president, and I think it is important for all of the president's supporters to realize that for almost the entirety of Trump's presidency, there were more than 50% of the country that disapproved of the job he was doing. It should come as no surprise to those people that more than 50% of the country voted against him in this presidential election. There is nothing that has been sort of controversial or surprising or fraudulent about how this election has been created, and I don't think that a witch hunt is the appropriate phrase. What we have is a president who is denying reality and stoking controversy and conspiracies, and those must be pushed back against.
Professor, before we had the awful events of last week, we had President like Biden saying that he really wants to reach across the aisle, that he wants to be the president for all Americans. As he looks at his task ahead right now, is that harder today or easier? I mean, on the one hand, certainly President Trump has lost some allies, some loyal political supporters. On the other hand, there does seem to be a core group that is, to use the president's term, angry.
Just like everything about it.
Well, look, it is true that this president has a loyal base of supporters who will follow him off any cliff he chooses to drive. But I think it is also important to realize that this president is quickly losing altitude in terms of his popularity and credibility with any of those Americans who are also engaged. We've seen corporations and CEOs saying they're no longer going to contribute funds to those Republicans who voted to overturn the electoral vote counting. There is also the reality that the president's current approval rating is now down in the 30s. He's lost just sort of 10 percentage points in the last week and a half. And I think the more he appears as a sore loser and really a fringe character, the more that Americans are going to turn away from his presidency.
Thank you very much for your perspective today. Really appreciate it. It's Lara Brown of George Washington University. And now it's time we get a check on the markets. Joining us now is Kaylee Line. So it doesn't look like the equities are going anywhere very dramatic, Kaylee.
Well, David, it's interesting. Just while I've been sitting here waiting to talk to you, we've actually seen the S&P 500 fall towards the lows of the session. It's now down about 0.4%. Of course, this follows the sell-off yesterday. That buy the dip mentality doesn't really seem to be taking hold today. That said, that doesn't mean the reflation trade isn't alive and well. You do have the small cap Russell 2000 outperforming. It's still higher by about 1.3%. And you need look no further than the energy complex to see reflation at work. WTI crude is higher by 1.4%, around $53 a barrel. Natural gas futures seeing a big pop up near 17%. And as a result, the energy sector is far and away the best performing within the S&P 500. It's up about 3% as a whole, and individual stocks like Occidental Petroleum are seeing boosts of as much as 12% in today's session. Now, the price action in equities certainly is noteworthy, David, but perhaps even more so is the continued action we're seeing in the bond market. Yields continue to climb higher and higher. We're up another 3 basis points on the 10-year note today, now sitting at about 1.17%. And as the yields move up, the curve is steepening. The spread between the 2s and 10-year notes is actually widening for a 7th straight day. In just the past 5 days, that spread has widened to the tune of about 19 basis points, now at the steepest since all the way back in 2017. Again, that is your reflation trade bets about stimulus coming under a democratically controlled government. My question, though, David, is when does that start to matter to the equity market? Because right now, the spread between the earnings yield on the S&P 500 and the yield on the 10-year Treasury is the narrowest since all the way back in 2018. That would mean that stocks are starting to look relatively less attractive when compared to bonds. It doesn't seem to be making a whole lot of difference at this point, but at some point, if those yields continue to tick higher, the equity market isn't going to be able to ignore it, David.
Yeah, it's a great question. We'll have to keep our eye on when does it make sense for money to flow back into bonds. Thank you so much to Data Lines for that report on the markets. Coming up, Sheldon Adelson, who built the largest casino company in the world and used his wealth to support Republican candidates and groups, has died. We'll take a look back at his legacy. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
So that video goes broadband speed in the next morning
matters. Broadband speed matters. Bet you think you've got super fast, hyper fast, or mega fast broadband? Chances are you're operating at the sluggish speed of your average snail. G Network delivers 900 meg upload and download speeds. That's 13 times faster than the London average broadband. Join G Network for just £22 a month. G Network, or the Gigabit Network, as we like to call it. Contract price £48 a month after initial 3-month term.
The next time you're in the TuneIn app and playing your favorite station or podcast, just keep scrolling down on the screen. From there, you can quickly revisit your recent listening or explore personalized and similar recommendations based on your interests and location. Scroll and explore more on TuneIn.
Have you heard the most unscripted, unfiltered, and unhinged sports show in the game? On the Skip and Shannon Undisputed podcast, Skip Bayless, Shannon Sharp, and Jenny Taft discuss the biggest stories in the world of sports.
Father Time is at least sort of looking over one shoulder right now. LeBron, you remember me?
The one thing, even Skip, because, they cut some games last year. That was 10, 12 games that he averaged 25. That's another 250, 275.
Search Skip and Shannon on TuneIn to listen.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are lower. Benchmark Treasury 10-year note yields are up to a 10-month high as investors mull the prospects of the economic recovery and vaccine rollout. The S&P, little changed, with the energy and consumer discretionary sectors gaining. Utilities and communication services the biggest decliners. Let's take a look at the markets. Right now, the S&P has turned into the red. It's down 0.5%, down 19. The Dow is down 0.3%, down 93. And the NASDAQ is down 0.4%, down 53. The 10-year is down 7/32. The yield is down 1.17%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 1.4%. 96 a barrel. Gold's down 0.6%. 1839.50 an ounce. The dollar yen 104.13. The euro $1.2167. The British pound $1.36. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now more Bloomberg Balance of Power with David Weston right here on Bloomberg Radio.
You live online and social media, but there's nothing like just being with the people.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. The Bloomberg First Word News, we go now to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. As you have been reporting, President Trump is not taking any blame for last week's deadly riot at the Capitol. He spoke to reporters at Joint Base Andrews outside Washington as he left today for Texas.
Well, if you read my speech, and many people have done it, and I've seen it both in the papers and in the media, on television, it's been analyzed, and people thought that what I said was totally appropriate.
Viral success.
President Trump said the House effort to impeach him for a second time is, quote, absolutely ridiculous, and that it's causing, again, quoting, tremendous anger. Vice President Pence will get an ultimatum from House Democrats today, and he's expected to reject it. Lawmakers will demand that the Vice President invoke the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. When the Vice President says no, the House will then vote to impeach the President for the second time in a little more than a year. Mr. Pence and the President met last night for the first time since the President's supporters stormed the Capitol. The federal government wants states to make COVID-19 vaccinations available to more people. The Centers for Disease Control is encouraging officials to offer shots to anyone older than 65, regardless of underlying conditions, and anyone 16 and older with a pre-existing condition. The vaccination rollout across the U.S. has been picking up steam. Vaccinations rose by 1.25 million Monday. That's according to data collected by Bloomberg. Global news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
Thank you so much, Mark. Sheldon Adelson, who passed away today at the age of 87, was a giant in the gaming industry, having built the largest casino company in the world. But he was also a giant in contributing to Republican candidates and causes and in his support for Israel. To take us through his legacy, welcome now Marty Schenker. He's Bloomberg Chief Content Officer. So, Marty, we've covered Mr. Adelson for years, both from the business side and also the political side. Start with the business side. Give us a sense of him. As I understand, a self-made man. He really started out in Boston with very, very little, and he did build quite an empire.
Yeah, it's interesting. He used to like to say, it's not a rags to riches story because my parents didn't even have rags, as he grew up in the Boston area. And he started out in the vending business and somehow stumbled into gaming, built a casino in Las Vegas, but his biggest achievement was moving the casino business to China and specifically Macau.
Yeah, so he saw China right at the very beginning. At the same time, as I say, we also covered him as a political matter because he was a very substantial contributor to a lot of Republican candidates and causes.
Yeah, and, he was probably the largest GOP contributor over the last couple of decades. But it was centered on his fervent backing of Israel. And he felt that the Republican Party more reflected his views about supporting Israel than the Democrats did. So he actually was a Democrat, then switched to Republican.
Yeah, and so it's no mystery why he had a relationship with President Trump. I mean, as President Trump goes down to Texas, actually, today, it's quite ironic that Sheldon Adelson is gone now.
There's no question about it. It's also ironic. It comes with a time when corporate America has decided to essentially defund the political system and specifically the Republicans over what happened last Wednesday.
Exactly. Is there anyone who will step into his shoes in terms of Republican donations?
It's hard to say. I mean, there are a number of well-heeled people on Wall Street who have contributed to the GOP. But as I said, this whole issue of whether or not corporations should be contributing directly to candidates is an issue that we're going to watch carefully over the next weeks and months.
Yep.
Of course, they still can contribute to PACs, and that's really where the money goes these days.
But it appears there's a lot of CEOs taking a hard look at those policies. Thank you so much to Bloomberg's Marty Schenker. Once again, Sheldon Adelson, dead at the age of 87.
How do you capture all of that fantastic information that you gather in store with customers, touch and feel products? And we created a concept called the connected rail. And this is using a combination of RFID and ultrasound.
If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right, but getting started. Healthy changes start with little changes, one way or another. And help you to feel better, inside and out, so you'll be healthier and more able to fight diseases. The NHS has lots of ideas to help you lose weight. Search Better Health. Let's do this.
When you call a Dell Technologies advisor, you get to talk to someone who isn't waiting for their turn to speak, but who actually wants to hear what you have to say, so they can provide tailored solutions that don't fit every small business. They fit yours. That's what it means to really listen. For advice on everything from laptops to the cloud, Dell Technologies recommends Windows 10 Pro for Business, the most secure Windows ever. Call an advisor today on 0800 169 1745 or visit dell.co.uk/advisor.
These days, you get everything online. Your weekly food shop, your updates from work.
Hi everyone.
Morning.
Everyone okay? Sorry, you're on mute.
And your next dream car. At Renault Retail Group, our showroom might be closed, but we are very much open online. Visit renaultretail.co.uk and get up to £750 towards your finance deposit, 2 years free servicing, and just 9.9% APR representative finance. Reserve your car for £99, then click and collect safely from your nearest showroom. Visit renaultretail.co.uk today. Selected cars, conditions apply.
David Weston. Well, the consequences keep on coming for President Trump to his actions of last week that led to that attack in the Capitol. We now have Deutsche Bank and Signature Bank, two of President Donald Trump's favored lenders. They're pulling away from the billionaire president in the wake of last week's deadly riot at the U.S. Capitol. We have Shonali Baska, who has a report out now on the Bloomberg on what is going on with these two banks, Deutsche Bank and Signature Bank. Deutsche Bank, as we know, has had a long-term relationship with President Trump and the Trump Organization. Last time I read, it said that President Trump owed them something like $300 million. He also has had personal accounts with Signature Bank. The reports are now that Signature Bank has basically closed those accounts, presumably giving the president back his money, raising questions about where does he turn now for his banking support, and also as he goes back into Trump Inc., how he manages his business. Will there be a need to roll over some of those loans to get refinancing, and to whom can he turn for that refinancing? There's no doubt that President Trump is really suffering some consequences, not just politically, not just in terms of his reputation across the country, but also in his business. And now we are delighted to have with us Bloomberg's Shonali Basak, who broke this story about Signature Bank and Deutsche Bank. So as I say, Deutsche Bank, long-term relationships, Signature Bank, personal accounts. So what comes next?
Right, long-term relationships, David. You have Signature Bank, which had Ivanka Trump even on the board of the company at one point. Now you have Signature Bank saying, you know, Trump should resign. How often do you see the banking industry really get involved here in politics in this way? What comes next is a great question, particularly for Deutsche Bank. Signature Bank had more than $5 million worth of Trump's personal accounts. They're planning on closing those accounts. But for Deutsche Bank, it's $300 million worth of loans that come due in a couple of years. What happens to that money? How does he refinance it? What banks will he turn to? And will they lend a willing checkbook?
Yeah, and Shonali, let's be honest. There's going to be somebody who will loan to him, whether a bank or a non-bank, things like that. Part of the question, I suspect, is at what cost? Does the borrowing cost go up given the difficulty he's having? People may want to have a little bit more money given to them in order to do business with President Trump, given his reputation just at the moment.
Well, reputational risk absolutely is one thing, David. And then you also have actually financial risks here as well. Should Trump continue on this trajectory here where people may not want to do business with him, then what kind of revenue will his properties be bringing in? Will people be canceling events at the hotels that bear the Trump's brand? What about, you know, the PGA, for example, we know is also canceling next year's business with him at the New Jersey golf course. So those are all financial implications on top of a pandemic that has already been a burden for the hotel and entertainment industry. So you have a number of risks here, reputational at this point in time being chief among them.
Yeah, there's always been a bit of a mystery about exactly how the Trump Organization works and where they get their money from, but a lot of reporting has suggested basically it was off of licensing that came because of his participation in The Apprentice. It was his brand and the fact that people wanted the Trump name, the Trump logo on their building, whether it was a hotel or resort. As you mentioned, he has golf clubs. It's not clear how much money he makes off of that. I wonder what the value of that brand will be in terms of licensing going forward.
That's absolutely the question, and that's a global brand. Remember, what does this mean in terms of his international business in India and other places, Brazil? And it's kind of that's the big question. Can he keep up that international business on top of this U.S. business? Of course, he does have a lot of Trump supporters still, right? Even though there are many members of the business community that are shying away from him in light of everything that's happened in the Capitol over the past week, and you know the very tough 9 days ahead of us that we have. It's still a long road ahead of us, and how fast that business takes to come back will be a question as he looks to build new businesses.
Well, in fairness, at least before the events of last week, a lot of people were still contributing. He'd amassed more than $200 million in contributions after the election for a war chest there. And you're quite correct. He has a lot of support across the country from some very adamant fans. At the same time, I wonder how that converts into a business as a practical matter. That's not the same as doing a business with a big resort or with a big hotel chain.
That's exactly right. And guess what? You know, in 6 months from now, 1 year from now, we'll be asking this question again when there is a bank that does take his relationship and move on with it, right? I mean, the reality is that the business community has flip-flopped a lot in the last couple of years, and who knows where it goes from here once the dust settles a lot more.
Yeah, there's also a lot of scrutiny being put now on some of the companies, including financial companies, who have contributed, some of the people who have supported President Trump, including some of the senators who objected to the electoral college votes.
I'm very glad you brought that up, because I think what's even more interesting is the scrutiny that comes way beyond Trump himself. For example, Citigroup had their PAC had donated some money to Josh Hawley's campaign in 2019. They pointed that out and said to their employees that when it comes to respecting the rule of law, it's critical when they're thinking about political donations moving forward. These big banks, they've paused, some of them have paused their political donations for a certain period of time. But again, those will continue, but albeit with a greater spotlight on where that money goes.
A lot more scrutiny, no question. Great reporting. Thank you so much for doing it. That's Bloomberg's Shonali Basak. As Congress debates the appropriate response to the attack on the Capitol last week, one of the basic questions is how to register strong condemnation, but at the same time move forward. A group of 6 Republican congressmen have written to President Trump, but we're going to talk with Larry Trump, who's a distinguished constitutional law professor from Harvard. And this is Bloomberg.
Just a carer. It's quite a small world.
If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right, but getting started. Healthy changes start with little changes, one way or another, and help you to feel better, inside and out, so you'll be healthier and more able to fight diseases. The NHS has lots of ideas to help you lose weight. Search Better Health. Let's do this.
As a business owner, has it been hard taking your comedy club online? Are you finding it tough switching to a virtual petting zoo? Make moving payments online the easier part of adapting your business. Search Barclaycard Business to find an offer that could suit your changing business needs. Offers end 31st of March 2021. Barclaycard, we take every payment seriously. Subject to application, financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's and exclusions apply. New UK customers only.
The Sky Broadband sale is now on. Get super reliable, super fast broadband and anytime calls, all for the super low price of just £25 a month. So everyone can stream shows, get together online and smash that high score. It's now just £25 a month for 18 months plus $19.95 setup. For new and existing customers, hurry to sky.com. Offer ends January 27th. Prices may change during contract. Sky Fibre areas. Speed varies by location. Average download speed 59 megabytes. Speed to hub. More at sky.com.
These days, you get everything online. Your weekly food shop, your updates from work,
Hi everyone. Sorry, you're on mute.
and your next dream car. At Renault Retail Group, our showroom might be closed, but we are very much open online. Visit renaultretail.co.uk and get up to £750 towards your finance deposit, 2 years free servicing, and just 9.9% APR representative finance. Reserve your car for £99, then click and collect safely from your nearest showroom. Visit renaultretail.co.uk today. Selected cars, conditions apply.
America's pastime is a big deal. It's also big business. Baseball Biz is the podcast about the business of baseball, covering everything from MLB history and operations to interviews with players, agents, owners, scouts, umpires, and beyond.
We have the regular baseball season. We get all involved with everything with, the World Series. Thank goodness. It's the most exciting thing you have. But then you say, what happens after that? Well, you
search Baseball Biz in one word on TuneIn to listen.
The next time you're in the TuneIn app and playing your favorite station or podcast, just keep scrolling down the screen. From there, you can quickly revisit your recent listening while discovering personalized and similar recommendations based on your interests and location. Listening to CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News Radio? Scroll to see a schedule of upcoming programs. Listening to today's hits? Scroll to see the latest songs you just heard. Listening to a live NHL game? Scroll to see when your team's next matchup is. Scroll and explore more on TuneIn.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. The Constitution and the rule of law that it embodies have been really put to the test in recent days, with challenges to the legitimacy of an election leading to a storming of the Capitol after a rousing address from the president to the crowd. We welcome now the foremost authority on the U.S. Constitution alive today. He is Larry Tribe. He's professor of law at Harvard Law School, as well as a Harvard University professor. He is also a public writer, including of a textbook of American constitutional law That has been cited more than any other legal text going back to 1950. So I love these little factoids here. Professor, thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with what's going on right now today in Washington. Before we get to impeachment, there's a resolution urging Vice President Pence to invoke the 25th Amendment to displace the President of the United States. There is little question, I think, in anyone's mind that the Vice President will not do that. He had dinner last night with the President and said he's going to stick out the term. So why are we doing this?
We want to give the Vice President at least an opportunity to perform his duty under the 25th Amendment, Section 4. It's there for the purpose of immediately removing from power someone who cannot discharge the duties of his office. We have a president who is obviously derelict in his duty. He's encouraging rather than discouraging the decapitation of a coordinate branch of government, of Congress. So we're at least giving Pence an opportunity. If he doesn't do it within 24 hours, we're going ahead to impeach, and that vote will be taken tomorrow.
So I want to take advantage of your being the foremost authority in the Constitution on that immediate part, because there's been some confusion about this. I heard Chris Christie, the former governor of New Jersey, over the weekend say, oh no, 25th Amendment doesn't happen immediately because the president can appeal to Congress. But as I understand it, in the meantime, the president of the United States, as Donald Trump, does not have the powers. The vice president takes the powers until that is resolved. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. Chris Christie is mistaken. We can simply run out the clock because the president's power to grab back his authority under the 25th Amendment doesn't really give him anything until after he's out of office.
So there is obviously a great deal of anger and disappointment, sadness with what President Trump did last week. There's a lot of consensus, I think, that something needs to be done, that something strong needs to be done. At the same time, President-elect Biden is coming to office. He needs to go forward with his government. How can we reconcile those two things? Make a strong statement that history will remember about this not being acceptable, what we saw last week, but at the same time, let President Biden move forward with his agenda.
That's Bloomberg Tech Report. President Biden has made clear that he knows how to walk and chew gum at the same time. He said that even if the Senate does not act as it should to remove this president before the inauguration on January 20th, the impeachment can go ahead even after this president is out of office, and that's important because a mere majority of Congress, after convicting him, a mere majority of the Senate can disqualify this monstrous president from ever again holding public office in the United States.
Is there any question in your mind that, in fact, you can proceed with a trial of impeachment against the president, now former president? It will have been by January 21st, even after he's left office.
Very little doubt. It's happened before, and in fact, the design of the Constitution would make very little sense if a president could simply resign just before the Senate votes to convict, and thereby deprive the Senate of the opportunity to do what the Constitution says, and that is disqualify a sufficiently outlaw president from ever again holding office. So the better interpretation of the Constitution says that even though you can't remove him once he's gone, by definition, you can nonetheless finish the trial and convict him and disqualify him. And in the meantime, the trial needn't take up very long. The first impeachment trial, where the charges were a lot more complicated, only took 4 days. This one might take 8 days if we spend only half of every day on it. But as the incoming president said, his agenda can be pursued in the morning and this can be done in the afternoon. There really is no reason not to go forward. And there's every reason to do absolutely everything we can to cut short even the remaining few days of this presidency, because with every passing hour, the harm you can do is incalculable. You could suddenly decide to pardon all of the people who were in there to try to kill Pence and Pelosi, and who did great damage and wreaked havoc and left 4 or I guess 5 dead bodies behind them. He can launch the nuclear codes. We cannot let this man remain in power even for an hour longer than necessary.
If the purpose in part is to really preclude him from holding federal office again, what about the 14th Amendment, which has a provision in there dating back to the Civil War? It was triggered by that, actually. The people who participated in a rebellion really cannot hold federal office. Would that preclude him from holding office, whether they convict him of impeachment or not?
That's a snare and a delusion. Several people, Bruce Ackerman of Yale and a couple of other people, have thought that if Congress simply says, oh, we find that Donald Trump is an insurrectionist, that's all it will take. No, it's not. That's a bill of attainder. In 1869, Chief Justice Chase pointed out that you have to decide through some fair, individualized process exactly who is guilty of insurrection or rebellion and therefore disqualified under the 14th Amendment. What I fear is that those people who are dangling this little-known part of the Constitution in front of everybody are going to give people an easy off-ramp so they can say, oh, well, I didn't vote for impeachment, but I did invoke Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. That's really a mirage, and I hope people get over it.
So let me ask a provocative question, perhaps. Is it possible that what President Trump said last Wednesday around noontime was actually protected by the First Amendment? Back when I took Con Law 2, there was Brandenburg against Ohio that had to do with the Ku Klux Klan. And some people are saying that that actually might protect him from prosecution, certainly.
No way. I'm a strong First Amendment advocate, but this is worse than yelling fire in a crowded theater. This is more like the Reichstag fire. Brandenburg says that you are protected by, if you just advocate, except when you're inciting imminent lawless action. This guy was inciting not just imminent lawless action, but the violent decapitation of a coordinate branch of the government, preventing this peaceful transition of power and putting a violent mob into the Capitol while he cheered them on from his safe position watching television in a tent. This is not protected by Brandenburg. That, too, is a complete distraction.
Well, it's good to take care of those red herrings as they come up. So, Professor, as a strong advocate of the First Amendment, which you no doubt are, what do you make of Facebook and Google banning, Facebook and Twitter, beg your pardon, taking President Trump off?
I think it's about time. They are private platforms. They have every bit as much right as Bloomberg or as the New York Times, frankly, to decide whom they will allow to use their platform. There is no First Amendment right to use private property or a private platform to get your views out. And if your views are causing violence and death, the private platform itself ought to be held responsible for not taking you off. That, too, is a complete red herring straw man. I guess I prefer herring and straw, but either way, it's a distraction.
Well, but are they still perfectly private? I mean, they're privately owned. They have shareholders and things like that.
Silicon Valley is all about building the future.
In the legal sense,
a startup
when they
called
really
Meta
can communicate with billions of people in a nanosecond around the world. Is it more like the public square situation where there are certain limitations? Are we comfortable with organizations that are that vast with whom they can communicate and facilitate communication among themselves? Are we comfortable with them having no restrictions whatsoever?
People often mix up augmented reality with virtual reality.
With Carol Cadwalder and Shoshana Zuboff and others of something which is called the real Facebook Oversight Board. I think the government should put some limits on them, partly because they're so powerful.
Meta has tried to make its version of the workspace feel
to use the platform. The limits are limits that have to be consistent with the First Amendment restrictions on the government, but we can't simply transform these platforms into
so you can see this eyeball, which is, by the way, photorealistic. You can see my hand is occluding the eyeball. Now the eyeball is occluding my hand, right?
If there are those sorts of guidelines, are they imposed in advance? Is it sort of like prior restraint, or is it only after something's been done
I can do this with two hands and rotate the thing. I could stretch it. I could throw it back right into the shelving system. And that's all you have to learn to become a modern
weapon.
And to prove this, the employees at Meta have started to get rid of their computer monitors.
Those guidelines need to be in place so that we don't unfairly surprise the owners of Facebook or other platforms or Twitter. But it seems to me that avoiding the ex post facto effect of imposing rules after the fact is not the same as violating the prior restraint doctrine, which basically says you can't muzzle people in advance.
Any segment where you get bill of attainder and ex post facto in one segment, that's a successful segment for me. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being with us. That's Larry Tribe. He's professor of law at Harvard Law School. And now there is news being broken across the Bloomberg, as I understand it. The U.S. is going to require COVID test for all international visitors. That's a kind of the Dow Jones report. So there will be requirements for COVID tests for all international visitors. For Bloomberg First Word News, we're going to go now to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. President Trump is on his way to Texas, where he will claim progress on that unfinished wall along the border with Mexico. The trip is seen as an attempt to deflect attention from the criticism of his behavior, also to highlight what the president sees as one of his signature accomplishments. Speaking to reporters this morning, Mr. Trump refused to take any blame for last week's deadly riot at the U.S. Capitol. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was coming to President Trump's defense. Secretary Pompeo told conservative talk show host Hugh Hewitt that Mr. Trump's legacy is larger than the deadly riots that may lead the president to being impeached for a second time. Pompeo said history will reflect on the quote, good work that President Trump has done. Two cabinet secretaries have resigned since last week's violence at the Capitol. Secretary Pompeo says he'll stay on the job through the end of President Trump's term.
We will have been able to
in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel is warning the country may need up to another 10 weeks of a lockdown. On a video call today, Merkel said that a strain of the virus that surfaced in the UK could lead to a rapid increase in Germany's contagion rates. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
Thanks so much, Mark. Coming up, social media as a tool of political action with Matthew Peralt of Duke. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right, but getting started. Healthy changes start with little changes, one way or another. And help you to feel better, inside and out, so you'll be healthier and more able to fight diseases. Download the free NHS weight loss app now. Search Better Health. Let's do this.
With up to 25% off selected homewares and electricals at Sainsbury's, give your home the perfect New Year refresh. From stylish bedding and scented candles to statement dinnerware and kitchen appliances, there's up to 25% off selected homewares and electricals until the 17th of January. Subject to availability at selected Sainsbury's stores. Excludes centrals and locals. T's and C's apply.
Then breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks moved down and benchmark Treasury 10-year note yields are up to a 10-month high as investors mull the prospects for an economic recovery and a vaccine rollout. The S&P did edge lower for day number 2 with utilities and communication service sectors leading the declines. Europe stock 600, little changed. Let's take a look at our markets. The S&P is currently down 0.3%, down 11. The Dow's down little change, down 18. And the Nasdaq's down 0.2%, down 25. The 10-year is down 6/32 with a yield of 1.16%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 1.5% at 53.04 a barrel, while COMEX gold's down 0.7% at 18.3820 an ounce. The dollar yen 104.09. The euro $1.2172, and the British pound $1.3628. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now more Bloomberg Balance of Power with David Weston right here on Bloomberg Radio.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Social media giants Facebook and Twitter have banned President Trump from their services, raising a host of questions about the role of these services, their rules of participation, and whether there should be regulation of them. We welcome now Matthew Peralt. He is director of the Duke Center on Science and Technology Policy, and he's also former Facebook Director of Public Policy. So thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Peralt. Give us your sense right now of the decision by Twitter and by Facebook to take President Trump off. With the right.
They certainly acted within their legal rights. They're protected by the First Amendment. They're able to make the decisions they want about what content to carry on their platform, including making the decision to kick off the president if they'd like to do that. There's a separate question about whether that's the right thing to do, and I do have concerns about it. As much as I disagree with the president's speech, and I disagree vehemently with it, he got 47% of the vote in the last election. 74 million people voted for
Lady
him.
Gaga's
There's
favorite digital pop
significant
star,
political
opened
support
shows
for the
for her
ideas that
in
he
the US 3
espouses, as
years ago.
horrific as I might think they are, and I think that's
Tens
speech
of
that people
thousands
deserve
of
to
fans
hear.
attended her
And
exhibition
the
and
question
live
that I
shows in
had
Tokyo.
as they made their decision was, why? What is the rule that was violated specifically? What did President Trump do specifically to violate what rule? And are we comfortable with that rule?
So the rule that I think platforms use to determine whether they will remove speech or not is whether it creates real-world harm. And so I'm not privy to the internal conversations of the company, but my guess is that the company has decided that the president was engaged in speech that created real-world harm, and that he didn't just do that once, but did that repeatedly. And that because of his repeated tendency to create real-world harm with his speech, he no longer deserved an opportunity to speak on the platform.
But a question that I've been asking people, and I find it difficult, is did the use of social media platforms cause real-world harm in Tahrir Square?
Sound of the future.
That's a very good question. I mean, people use social media platforms for a lot of different purposes. They use it for things that are good. They use it for things that are problematic. Typically, the First Amendment law in the United States, the jurisprudence that we've had for hundreds of years, is focused on punishing conduct, not on punishing speech. I think the perpetrators of the riots, the insurrection at the Capitol last week, should be prosecuted, those who violated the law, but that we should try to avoid censoring political speech, particularly speech that's widely held, speech for views that's widely held by so many people.
Does there come a point where, let's take Facebook, because it's the larger, let's be clear of the two, Facebook becomes so ubiquitous, I mean, global, billions of users, where it's not really perfectly accurate to call it merely a private company anymore?
I think it is a private company. I think people do have choices about the platforms they might be able to use. You saw many people flocking from Twitter and Facebook to Parler, for instance. And so people do have alternatives. I think competition between different social media networks, different speech platforms is a positive thing, and it would be good if there was more of that kind of competition.
What's the role of the government in all this? And we've heard a lot about Section 230 of the Communications Act, which basically exempts platforms like Facebook or Twitter from being treated as a publisher, and therefore they can't be sued for libel the way the New York Times could be. What is the proper role for the government? Is it through Section 230? Is there some other regulation or no regulation at all that's appropriate?
Yes. So I think there are two different things. One is that it would be helpful if our representatives weren't engaged in the kind of speech that they were engaged in that led to the kind of violence and riots that we saw last week. I believe that is speech that should be permitted, but I would hope that voters would decide that representatives who espouse those views are probably not fit for office. In terms of regulating speech of tech companies, Section 230 is a really important component of online expression, of views that are widely held, as well as more fringe views, both on the far right and on the far left. And I think as much as we can protect platforms as forums for expression is a positive thing. There are reforms of Section 230 that I think would be helpful. One example is that the federal government could pass more aggressive federal criminal law, could essentially modernize federal criminal law for the digital age. And Section 230 does not provide immunity to tech platforms for violations of federal criminal law. So, for instance, if the Congress were to pass laws that prohibited certain kinds of voter suppression on social media platforms, or if the federal government were to prohibit certain types of speech that could actually incite riots, then tech platforms would not be able to plead Section 230 as a defense to lawsuits that were initiated under that new federal criminal law.
But does that mean that actually Facebook, theoretically, if there was this federal criminal statute and there was voter suppression attempted, Facebook would be liable criminally, potentially?
It could be if it violated the terms of the statute. And so statutes that deal with speech obviously need to survive First Amendment scrutiny. So the statute that I'm talking about would obviously have to be very narrow and would have to be very specific about the kind of speech and the kind of conduct it prohibited. But it is the case that if federal criminal law were modernized for the digital age and that we actually had rules set out by Congress that outlined criminal conduct related to voter suppression or voter fraud or an online incitement to riot, then tech platforms could be liable if they were complicit in violation of that law.
Would that law apply as well to the pipe, as it were, to the carrier?
Conceivably, I believe it could.
Wow, that would be quite something. Do you think that would be good for the industry? I mean, talk about the industry. Will this hurt Facebook? Will it hurt Twitter as a business?
So I think we're in a really problematic position right now where tech companies are being forced to design the rules that govern so many aspects of our public discourse and conduct in the public square. I don't think it's right to expect our companies to make those decisions. We need an active legislator, and active regulatory bodies like the Federal Election Commission to outline what the rules of the road are, and then tech companies would have to abide by those rules. Currently, I think we displace so much of our hope for regulating the public square to tech platforms that are private companies.
Okay, thank you so much for being with us today. That was very helpful. Matthew Peralt, he's director of the Duke Center on Science and Technology Policy. He's also former Facebook director of public policy. Coming up, the effects of last week's events on Trump Inc. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
If you want to lose weight, it's not about getting it right, but getting started. Healthy changes start with little changes, one way or another.
Now,
and
there
help
are
you to
a
feel
lot
better,
of fitness gadgets
inside
out there.
and out, so you'll be healthier and more able to fight diseases.
In my quest to get fit,
The NHS has lots of ideas to help you lose weight. Search
At
Better
least
Health.
one personal
Let's
trainer
do
I know
this.
was a little bit skeptical. Yeah,
In the trade, sign up to Wix Trade Pro and get 10% off every time you shop with no minimum spend. Download the app to register. Always cheaper with Wix Trade Pro. Terms apply.
Whether you're thinking of moving to this,
not much different than the Bill Flex
or escaping to this,
To be honest, the original Jane
or getting a bit more space for them.
But some of these gadgets
Barclays
that are
mortgage
just coming
experts
to the
are
market
here to help
do
you
so
keep
much
moving,
more than what
even
they
at
used to
weekends,
do, just
every
tracking
step
your
of the way.
activities.
Find out
All
how
of
much you
them,
can borrow in
this
as little
test
as
strap was
15
my
minutes
favorite.
without affecting your
It
credit
comes with a
score.
robot coach
Search Barclays
that
Mortgages.
points to the future.
Barclays.
One where
Make
you
money
might
work
not
for you.
need a human trainer
Subject to
at all.
application, financial
And it works like
circumstances,
this.
and borrowing history. T's and C's apply.
You wear
With
the
up to
test strap so that it
25% off
can
selected
read your
homewares
heart
and
rate,
electricals
and
at
that
Sainsbury's.
moves
Give your
free
home the
app and
perfect
to you.
New Year refresh. From stylish bedding and scented candles to statement dinnerware and kitchen appliances. There's up to 25% off selected homewares and electricals until the 17th of January. Subject to availability
whether you're
at
running
selected
outside
Sainsbury's
or you're
stores,
doing
centrals and
body
locals,
weight
T's and C's
exercises
apply.
indoors.
This week on the New
Swing
Yorker
your arms
Radio Hour,
faster
we'll
to
try
get
to
your legs
understand how the
moving
United
quicker.
States
Let's
got the
crush this
pandemic
round.
so wrong.
And by reading your
Our
heart rate,
response
she knows
never
exactly
had
how
a
hard you're
national
working.
plan. When the
She
Obama
keeps you honest.
administration
Way to
turned
go. You are
over
in the target
documents
zone.
to the incoming Trump administration,
Keep
among
pushing.
them
You're
was
almost
the
at the end of the
playbook
round.
for a
Don't
pandemic.
give up.
And the Trump administration just
I've been running
jettisoned
for
that.
7
Lawrence
years
Wright
now,
joins
and
us
my
on the New
biggest
Yorker Radio
problem
Hour
is
from
that I never
WNYC
push myself
Studios.
hard enough.
Listen to this
I
episode
end up going
on
on the
TuneIn
same slow,
today.
comfortable 30-minute jog.
If you ever
but
need
the
a break
move
from
HR
24/7
burn
news
blasted
coverage
me out
on
of that
TuneIn,
rut.
remember, you can
By the
explore
end of the
TuneIn's
half-hour
awesome library of
exercises,
music
I was
stations
drenched
perfect
in
for
sweat
every
in a way
mood
that I
and
never
activity.
am when I
Just
work out
search
alone.
music
Training
to
with a real
find what
person
vibe
is
you're
great,
feeling.
whether that's your group instructor or your coach or your personal trainer. But TuneIn's,
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television
For the
and
rest of
Radio.
us,
I'm David
this
Weston.
$60
President Trump
gadget
hasn't
is all
just
you
damaged
need.
his presidency with his actions last week. He may well have also damaged his business as well. For a report, we welcome now our Bloomberg colleague, Sophie Alexander. Sophie, welcome. Good to have you here. So give us a sense of what we think this might mean for so-called Trump Inc.
Yeah, so he's going to be leaving the White House very soon, going back to a business empire that for the past 4 years, the landscape in which it is has changed so much, and everything that happened last week, they have really put a dagger in all of that because a lot of people are distancing themselves from Trump and his brand. So there's a big question mark as to what's going to happen.
Well, perhaps in another business, okay, damage to brand certainly is nothing you want to seek, but isn't the brand central to the Trump business? I mean, as far as we know from his business, wasn't an awful lot of it licensing that name?
Absolutely. You know, the Trump building, Trump is branded across the front of everything. So it's going to be interesting to see how many people are going to want to stay in a Trump hotel. You know, the PGA canceled its tournament at a Trump golf club. there's just a lot of people who no longer want to be associated with the brand, a lot of companies that no longer want to be associated with the brand. So we're going to see how it shakes out and who will want that, who will be the customer base.
There's also a report from Bloomberg today that we have Deutsche Bank and Signature Bank, two banks that have dealt with the president for a long time, basically are pulling back. Signature Bank, I think, closed his 2 accounts reportedly, and Deutsche Bank reportedly, at least, doesn't want to continue doing business with him. What could that mean for his enterprises? Because he is fairly highly leveraged, which is not unusual, as I understand it, for a real estate developer.
That's right, and he still owns Deutsche Bank about 300 and knows what's going to happen with that. It is a big question as to where he's going to borrow from in the U.S. In Signature Bank and Deutsche Bank, we didn't just deal with Trump, the president. They dealt with his family and his inner circle as well. Ivanka was on the board of Signature. So it's not just a question of what Trump is going to do. It's also a question of whether these banks are going to continue to deal with the family. Are they going to continue to deal with Jared and Ivanka?
Sophie, do we have any sense about what this means for him internationally? Because we have seen some reports that actually he's been making more money overseas than even domestically.
Yeah, I think it varies a lot how what attitudes are in different countries. But like in Israel and the Middle East, Trump could do a lot of business there.
Okay, thank you so very much. Really great to have you with us. That's Bloomberg's Sophie Alexander on Trump Inc. Coming up, Balance of Power continues on Bloomberg Radio. In our second hour, we're going to talk to sports writer Rick Riley about what Sophie was just talking about, the PGA's decision to terminate its relationship with President Trump's Bedminster Golf Club. We know how much President Trump loves golf. You will always see him on the golf course. He really, this was terribly important to him, and now the PGA tournament will not be held there in 2022. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
A big army, a cure to a pandemic, a revolution. All of these take either a lot of people, thousands of hours, or massive amounts of space. But for Julian Assange, all he needs is one room.
If you want to lose weight,